Xbox On. Welcome to Xbox On, a podcast with one host about one console, the Xbox One. I am said host, Jesse DeRosa, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about the latest Xbox news for the week of July 9th, 2020, including Xbox have announced a date for their July Xbox Series X event, next generation games will likely cost $70, Xbox is reportedly interested in buying WB Interactive, and more. For those of you that are big Halo fans, of which I assume there are a good handful since this is an Xbox podcast, you may have noticed a lot of quote-unquote leaks or rumors going on about Halo Infinite lately. Relates to the Mega Bloks toys that have been coming out or that have been leaking and being previewed for Halo Infinite. So Mega Bloks is like, for those who aren't familiar, is like basically the main competitor to Lego. Not that, Mega Bloks holds a candle to Lego. Obviously, Lego's massive, but Mega Bloks is like a Lego-esque kind of competing toy brand, and they've had the Halo license for pretty much as long as Halo toys have been a thing. And so Mega Bloks always makes Halo toys every time new Halo stuff comes out, and we've gleaned a lot of insight as to what's going on in Halo Infinite thanks to these Mega Bloks leaks. But lately there've been some I've been clicking on them because I just want to remain in the dark from this point on about what's happening with Halo Infinite. I just want to see the gameplay reveal and then just play the game when it comes out. But there have been little like nuggets of like supposed story arcs or like plot points about the game leaked from new images relating to new Mega Bloks toys. And I've seen a lot of people try to extrapolate, like, okay, this toy means this. The fact that the enemies on the toys wear this outfit means this. The fact that, this playset comes with these characters and these vehicles means this about the story. And I think people are overlooking possibly the biggest quote-unquote like leak or spoiler about the game, as the biggest one that you could possibly notice, which is the fact that all of these toys are sold and made in the Mega Bloks art style. So if you really want to know a big leak or spoiler about Halo Infinite, I think you could point out the fact that it seems like 343 might be going for a Mega Blok art style for this game. If these toys are really carrying so much information, so much of a deep look into what we can expect from this game, doesn't it stand to reason that maybe 343 is getting their ideas for Halo Infinite from Mega Bloks? Maybe Mega Bloks is the creative vision behind this game, and that when we play Halo Infinite, we'll actually see that Master Chief looks like a Mega Blok, and that all the enemies look like Mega Bloks, and just inexplicably all of the Halo universe now looks like Mega Bloks. So I think that's something people have been overlooking. Obviously, this isn't fact, but it's largely the case. It's likely the case. It's highly possible that Halo Infinite is just that abandoned, canceled Mega Bloks game that we never got for Halo. So there's that. Another thing I've actually been thinking about, every now and then when people talk about Lockhart, the lower powered next gen Xbox that we haven't officially had revealed yet, people always say something about how, oh, well, the thing about the Series S or Lockhart, whatever you want to call it, people complain about how it's significantly underpowered, and in some aspects it's supposedly lower powered than the Xbox One X, a console that's already been out on the market since 2017. And to this, I feel like, I just started thinking about this, like, why would Microsoft, release such a bare bones console and, have it as part of their next gen lineup? And I thought about that. I'm like, I think people are looking at this too much like, when the Wii U came out and there was like the white one with 8 gigs and the black one with 32 gigs, or like the PS5, which is going to come out with two models that are the exact same. The only difference is one has a disc drive and one doesn't. Or like, the Xbox 360 that had like the arcade with no hard drive, and then the regular one that came with a hard drive. And it's not, I don't think that the whole point of the Series S or Lockhart and then, the Series X is that one is just mildly different from the other. I think the idea is, since this is the console generation, to blur the generation lines and to, throw the whole concept of console generations in the trash. And since, Xbox Series X is kind of the console gaming space's foray into more of like a PC specifications kind of method of thinking of console generations, that maybe maybe that's the whole point of the Lockhart. It's not that, oh, well, it's more powerful than an Xbox One, but it's not as powerful as a Series X. I don't think that's the point. I think it's that, basically we're cutting off the Xbox One. When these new consoles come out this holiday, we're not going to be selling Xbox Ones and Xbox One X's. It's just the Series S and the Series X. And you can go into a store and buy whichever one you want, and maybe one's super underpowered and maybe one's super beefy. But the whole point isn't that this is the new next generation of Xbox. It's that from now on, almost like a soft reboot on like what Xbox is. It's like, these are your two choices for Xbox, not the new next generation Xbox, but just Xbox as a brand. You can get this one that's super basic. It's $250. It only runs 30 games, usually cap at like 30 FPS, and they run at a resolution of 1080p. And it's just your generic run of the mill, super affordable, consumer friendly Xbox. And then the Series X is for more of our hardcore fans, the ones who want to do 4K, 60 FPS or more, and just have this super high fidelity gaming experience, kind of like, PC tech spec nerds. That's what the Series X is for. And so I see this kind of as Microsoft less so trying to, fit in this mentality of generational options and SKUs for their console, and more so just saying, we're throwing out the Xbox One because that was back when we were doing generations. That's back when we were doing the typical thing. Now we just have the Xbox Series family of consoles, and you're just going to pick the one that, because isn't that the whole point of the Series name, is that, this was the whole story back when the console came out, is that the Xbox Series X is not called Xbox Series X. The consoles in general are just called Xbox now. We've dropped all additional naming conventions. The Series X is just to differentiate what model of it is, So the same thing stands to reason with the Series S or Lockhart, where it's like it's not the Xbox 360 this version or the PlayStation 5 this version. It's just Xbox, just like the Xbox Series X is. They're both just regular Xbox. It's which version of Xbox did you get, not which version of Xbox Series did you get. And I think it's kind of a hard concept, I think, for a lot of gamers to kind of get on board with, or to get their brains starting to think that way, because we've been so trained and taught throughout all these various generations, from Nintendo to Sega to Sony to even Microsoft, that you do a generation of hardware, you have a hard cutoff, you move on to the next thing, and it works in like these generational leaps. Whereas now we're doing this more fluid kind of whatever thing, and having that kind of break from the Xbox One generation, and then just having various models of Xbox for people to pick with varying, like largely varying different degrees of performance, is just a way of saying what Xbox fits your needs, what price range fits your budget, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's the whole point of, and this is all, of course, conjecture until we really know what the Series S or the Lockhart is called, what it's priced at, what its specs are. But I think this concept isn't that, just because you're buying a Series S or Lockhart means it's more powerful than any of the Xbox One consoles. I think the point is that, what if you don't want to spend $500 or $600 on the most powerful console of all time? What if you just want to spend $250, $300, get your foot in the door and have the ability to play Xbox because you've never owned an Xbox before, or you haven't owned an Xbox in years, or you're like a more casual gamer, or you heard that this new Halo game is good or whatever, and you want to give it a try. Well, that's what the Series S allows you to do, because for as great as the Xbox Series X sounds on paper, especially to us Xbox fans, it is pretty off-putting to the general consumer, right? Because if you think about like the Nintendo Switch, a console that sells like crack, not because it's the most powerful console ever made, but because it's an affordable and accessible console to almost anyone, to pretty much anyone who wants to play a video game, right? Anyone from like hardcore gamer to Nintendo classic fanboy to I barely ever play games can get behind the idea of like $250 to $300 will get you a Switch, and then you can play Mario or Zelda or Animal Crossing or whatever you want to play. Microsoft doesn't really have that alternate, or Microsoft doesn't really have that with the Series X. The Series X is very specifically targeting the most hardcore gamers. If you think about mass audiences, they're not really excited by the idea of like, oh wow, I can break 60 FPS, I can have true 4K gaming and ray tracing, and all for $600 or whatever. That's not really enticing to your average consumer. Your average consumer is saying, wow, that new insert name of game here looks really good. I want to play it, but unfortunately that new console is too expensive. And the Series S is supposed to cater to that person who doesn't really give a shit about the FPS and the resolution, but just says, I want to play this game. It's on this console. I wish that that console was more accessible and affordable for people like me. And that's kind of the point in having there be such a large gap between your Series X and your Series S. Clearly, this is a conversation probably best fit for like a news story about the Lockhart, but it was just something I had a random thought about, so I thought I'd just cram it here at the top of the show, which is fitting anyway because usually the top of the show is just an hour of me talking about food and other unrelated Xbox topics. So nice to start our Xbox podcast this week with a little information or conversation actually regarding the thing this podcast is supposed to be about. So with that said, we will now jump into our comments, shoutouts from last week, and go derail this whole thing and stop talking about Xbox and maybe, hopefully, talk about some pizza. Our first comment this week comes from Fatal Frost, who says, I've been listening to this podcast weekly for the last 6 months or so, but on Spotify, so I've never bothered to comment. Just wanted to say that listening once a week is just a really enjoyable experience and is such an awesome way to catch up on all the big Xbox news for the week. I really appreciate your effort that you put into this show, and I hope you continue it for a long time. Thank you, Fatal Frost. I recognize that name. I believe you followed me on Twitter or Xbox or something recently, but I recognize the name, so I greatly appreciate the shout out and the kind words. Always really exciting, honestly. This isn't like a YouTuber trying to get big kind of thing to say. This is really just genuinely, this show for a long time was starting to get very tiring and unfulfilling to do on a weekly basis, because there was a long time where I was doing this show and it felt like no one was listening and I wasn't getting any feedback. And not that I'm entitled to that or deserve it by any stretch of the imagination, but it was disheartening to feel like I've been consistently putting this work in the show and nothing happened. And for some reason, whatever happened, but maybe it was COVID or the announcement of the Xbox Series X, but in the past 3 to 5 months or whatever it's been, this show's really been picking up. Its listenership is picking up, but most importantly to me, people have been commenting and asking questions and striking conversation and posting silly ass things, and that's really what I want this show to be about more than anything, is Xbox fans having a place to come and converse about Xbox, but mostly me because I'm the host. So just know that all your voices come second to mine, you fucks. But thank you for writing in, Fatal Frost. Our next comment here comes from OG Man, who commented the other week. This is his second time coming in. Thank you again for writing in. He goes, listening to the podcast this week, I heard some people talking about the prospect of a battle royale mode in the new Halo Infinite. Being a Halo fanboy myself, much like you are, I'm not sure how I feel about this, and I'm not sure if I would like an open world Halo game. What are your thoughts? Also, just wondering a bit of your backstory regarding your love for Disney. You may have discussed in a previous podcast, but as a newer listener, I've picked up on your love for all things Disney. Just curious how that all came to be. Again, keep up the great work. Looking forward to listening next week. Thank you, OG Man, for commenting. I really actually appreciate this comment a lot because, one, your first question about Halo Infinite I think is a really good question that I'm excited to talk about, and two, your question about Disney is a perfect way for me to derail this podcast and talk about something that I'm sure the mass majority of the audience doesn't want to hear about, so I can't wait to get into that as well. But let's start with the more pertinent and pressing question here about Halo Infinite. So this is funny that you say this because a couple of years ago, I don't know if I say this a lot, but I try to limit the amount of gameplay or video game related news I consume. I honestly only really check Windows Central and IGN and websites like that about once or twice a week. And that's just to gather up all the news I'm going to use to write about the show. I used to be a lot more of a video game news consumer with podcasts and news sites and YouTube channels. But I really tried to roll back on that, one, because a lot of it I just don't find as interesting anymore, and two, because I don't want too many things to influence my opinions and the things I had to say for this podcast. I want this podcast to be my natural reactions and thoughts and feelings towards news rather than just a recitation of what I hear out there. Although to some extent, my ideas and thoughts are pretty influenced by the few sources I do follow. And I guess the only reason I'm bringing this up is actually because one source I actually do respect and follow quite often is Colin Moriarty, he's actually a PlayStation podcaster. He's longtime video game industry guy who actually, for whatever reason, is a controversial figure, even though all he does is talk about PlayStation. But he, as someone who worked in the industry for a very long time, had on pretty good authority that apparently about 2 years ago, whatever year it was where EA announced the Firestorm mode for Battlefield 5, their Battle Royale mode. He said that E3, I'm pretty sure it was 2018, but that E3 apparently 343 had a Battle Royale mode for Halo 5 that they were ready to reveal and show off at that year's Xbox press conference. And then after the EA Play event happened 1 or 2 days beforehand, they saw the kind of negative reaction that Firestorm or whatever it's called from Battlefield 5 was getting, and the kind of, audience sentiment that like Battle Royale was quickly becoming the next obnoxious trend in gaming, that we didn't need a million of these things and gamers weren't really having it. And that basically what happened was they just immediately cut the project. They cut it from the show and put it back on the drawing board, and we're like, I don't know that we're going to do this. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but usually his sources are pretty reliable. So I've always hung on that, thinking that's so weird, the idea of a Battle Royale mode in a Halo game. And with that, I always thought, well, I think a better idea would try to be to put a Battle Royale mode in Halo, or in the next Halo game, Halo Infinite, rather than trying to push it or shoehorn it into a Halo game that's pretty much at the end of its lifespan, which is Halo 5, or, at the end of its lifespan in terms of being the most relevant in recent Halo. So it's really interesting that apparently this story is kind of making the rounds again, and it doesn't surprise me at all, the thought that maybe they didn't cancel the project altogether, but they shelved it and decided to make it a Halo Infinite thing, or maybe it was always a Halo Infinite thing. But I guess the only reason I'm bringing that up is to say this is not the first time I've heard murmurings about Battle Royale and Halo. I think I'm of a couple minds with this. One, if I were in charge of Halo, if I were Bonnie Ross, if I worked at 343 and I had the final say, would I be pushing for a Battle Royale mode in a Halo game? No, absolutely not. One of the things that makes Halo so special is that Halo was a franchise that spearheaded, right? It was a unique sci-fi franchise back in a time where sci-fi wasn't really like beyond surface level in any video game. It was arguably, Halo is like the most lore-driven and dynamic and deep and fan-driven kind of sci-fi game ever created in the video game sphere. And more importantly than that, it was just its gameplay loop and what it did for first-person shooters on home console, and the history Halo has with not only local multiplayer but online multiplayer, with kind of being the thing that ushered Xbox Live into the home of people all over the world. Halo is just one of those franchises that's all about setting the trend and kind of spearheading and being ahead of the curve. And so that's one thing about Halo I've always really loved and respected. And I think most Halo fans would agree that hasn't really been Halo in recent years, even though, I would argue Halo went as far as to really make the real-time strategy genre a feasible genre for home console with Halo Wars, and that, even like in 2009 when ODST came out, I feel like Halo was kind of early in the kind of horde mode genre. When that was a new thing, they were kind of early to that and kind of did it in their own way and innovated in a unique way. But I guess that's really the closest thing we can compare a Battle Royale mode in a Halo game to, right? Would be like when ODST got Firefight, because when Firefight came out, it was around the time like Gears of War had got a horde mode, and Call of Duty, of course, famously had its Nazi zombie mode, and that kind of game mode was really blowing up and taken off at that time. So in that sense, it's not like it would be completely unprecedented for Halo to be like, oh, we're gonna try to follow that new multiplayer mode trend thing. But at the same time, they got to do like what Bungie did when they made Firefight for Halo ODST, or hell, they need to do what 343 did when they made Warzone or Warzone Firefight for Halo 5. And just, if you're going to do Battle Royale, make sure you have a really good, fun, and interesting and unique twist on the genre, so that it at least feels distinctly Halo, or like at least it was something where you could creatively exercise some new ideas within this already, fastly stale genre, in my opinion. Yeah, I think like most Halo fans, I don't like the idea of 343 kind of using this kind of bandwagon-y thing of like everyone has a Battle Royale and shoehorning it into something as special and sacred as Halo. Halo is one of those things where you only get it every now and then, because it's a very meticulously made game. It's a very like painstakingly hard to make crafted world where they put so much deliberate effort into making sure the multiplayer is just so, and the story is just so, and the campaign is just so, and the balance and the sound design. There's so much that goes into making Halo, Halo. I don't mean to disrespect, the many people that work on Call of Duty games, but it's one of those things where like, hey, Call of Duty feels like a game. It's like you buy it in November and you're over it by December or January, and then you forget about it and move on to the next one. It's like junk food game. Whereas like Halo is like, every Halo game is supposed to be like a timeless classic from the moment it releases, right? That's why that's why people are excited right now that Halo 3 is out on PC right now, because Halo 3 was super fucking amazing in 2007, and now it's 2020, and Halo 3 is still super fucking amazing. That's the whole point of a Halo game, is it's instant classic, never gets old, always super fun to play, whether you're playing Combat Evolved or Halo 3 or Reach or 4 or whatever. Every Halo game is a timeless classic, and you got to be careful with Battle Royale, because even though it could potentially be a fun thing now, it could look pretty bad in like 4 years when Battle Royale is a genre that kind of crashed and burned after everyone tried to do it, and it became a race to the bottom type of deal. And then we're all just looking in retrospect, and you see all the YouTube essay accounts out there doing the videos of like, remember when Halo had Battle Royale? Or it's called Battle Royale, that time Halo tried to be cool or whatever. And everyone starts talking about, oh, remember when Halo tried to do a Battle Royale mode? Oh, that was so crazy. That's such a 2020 thing. Oh my God, I can't believe they did that. So I think that's where the concern, or at least for myself initially, comes from, is we don't want to see Halo become a trend follower. We want to see it be a trend setter. And I think that's a lot of why people hate, the fact that Halo ever introduced run and things like that, or like Spartan armor abilities, is because we want to see Halo be what makes Halo unique. We don't want to see it playing catch up with Fortnite or Call of Duty. And I don't think having a Battle Royale inherently means that it's playing catch up or it's trying to jump on the bandwagon, but I think the cynic in all of us feels that way initially. And if you're going to do something like put a Battle Royale mode in a Halo game, you're going to have a lot to prove to turn people over to win over the fans. So I don't know how I feel about it, but as someone who pretty much dislikes every Battle Royale I've ever played with the exception of Apex Legends, I would be cautiously optimistic about trying a Battle Royale mode in Halo. But I mean, if it's fun, it's fun. I guess that's all that really matters. If it's a good mode and it's addictive and it's fun to play, does it matter? I don't know. I just make sure that that's not hindering the development time of modes like your classic arena multiplayer and of course your campaign, which has to be beautiful and perfect because that's what we're all here for. But yeah, I totally get that sentiment. Now, as for the part about Halo Infinite being open world, this is something people have been speculating about ever since, we got that first teaser back in 2018 for like kind of the setting and the tonal trailer we got. And I've kind of always been of the mindset that Halo Infinite is an open world game, but I think that's kind of because I've somehow convinced myself of that by always saying that, I always say on the show, Halo Infinite needs to be Halo's equivalency of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where it needs to feel like Halo and be Halo in spirit and in tone, but also reinvent the wheel so that it feels like the evolution or of what Halo needs to be, in 2020. So I don't know, somewhere along the lines of me always saying that, I've convinced myself that means Halo Infinite is an open world game, but I don't know that to be true. And I don't follow anyone specifically who has made me think that's true. The only like Halo YouTubers or influencers I follow are pretty much people who just talk about like Halo lore. So that's pretty much all the Halo news I consume from like fans, is just, lore, like what happened in this book and things like that, clarifying this concept in the Halo universe. So I don't really know, but I have to imagine that if not like completely open world, like fucking, I don't know, Witcher or Fallout or Zelda or whatever, it's got to at least contain open world elements. And I think we always knew that was what 343 was getting at, especially with Halo 5, because Halo 5 had those weird missions where you were just kind of dropped into like these zones. There's like the one on Sanghelios and there's the one on Meridian where you're just kind of exploring and talking to people, and they're like 5 minutes long, and you just walk around and get intel, and then the level's over. And I think I remember seeing that somewhere along the development of Halo 5, those were originally intended to be more like open-ended, open world levels, and that they're supposed to be more, it was supposed to encourage exploration and to kind of break up the monotonous shooting of the game. I don't know that was really the case, but I mean, it seems like it was. Those levels kind of felt janky and out of place anyway, so I assume there was a bigger intention there from the start, and that's what they're going to do with Halo Infinite. That's why Halo Infinite is taking 5 years instead of 2 or 3 years, is because they're really taking the time to flesh out this world, make it big, break down the walls, and make Halo into something grander than what it was. Halo Combat Evolved really fucked with our sense of exploration, because when you think about level 2, when you think about landing on that Halo ring in Halo Combat Evolved, you think about what an open world it feels like. There's so much to explore, and you can still play that level and get lost a little bit. But then if you play a game like Halo 5 or Halo 4, it definitely feels a lot more linear and kind of like it's funneling you through the game. So I gotta assume that 343 is really interested in kind of in their effort, in their mission to, as Bonnie Ross says, kind of have that spiritual reboot for Halo. And as we know, Halo Infinite contains a Halo ring. We've seen this all over the marketing for the game. I think that's kind of what they're doing, is they're saying, well, we're taking you back to a Halo ring, but now we're gonna break it open and make it more open world and explorable than ever before. And I think, I don't know, in theory, without thinking about it too much, I think that's the right choice for Halo. But at the same time, I am wary of what that means, because you think about Halo or Bungie's classic, like 3 seconds of fun gameplay loop philosophy, which is, for those that don't know, is Bungie's mentality that the thing that makes Halo so fun is that it's like I think they say it's like 10 seconds of fun or 7 seconds of fun. It's that every 7 or 10 seconds or whatever it is, you should always be having fun. So whether that means turning the corner and there's a new group of enemies, or you throw a grenade and it makes a fun explosion, or just something that happens that kind of on a subconscious level is engaging the player every 7 or 10 seconds or whatever. And that's what makes the game addicting and fun. Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's the core concept of game design is how do you trick the player into thinking that they're not doing the same thing over and over again. Obviously, if you ever talk to someone who doesn't play video games or doesn't appreciate games, especially Halo, they look at it from an outsider's perspective and they go, I don't get this game. All you do is shoot stuff. How is this fun? All you do is just shoot and shoot and shoot. And it's one of those things where it's like, on a subconscious level, when you're playing it, the fun of the game is that it's doing such a good job immersing you in subverting, or it's doing such a good job immersing you and getting you caught up in the events of the game and being visually appealing and being fun, that you forget that at the end of the day, really all you're doing is just shooting aliens over and over and over again. So I think it's harder to attain that concept and keep it intact if you're going to do an open world game. So I'm really curious to see, if you're really going to make Halo an open world game, you're really going to have to take some liberties with the formula. You're really going to have to move things forward and change really drastically some core aspects of the game. And so I'm hesitant or cautious about what that means for Halo's gameplay formula. But I also think, as someone who genuinely does not like open world games, or doesn't like how everything feels the need to be open world these days, that if any game can really pull off an open world game, or can really justify itself as an open world experience, I think Halo's one of them. Because maybe this just comes from me as a Halo fanboy, but I think that world, that universe of Halo is just so ripe for exploration. And it's like the one example of a game where I really wouldn't mind pouring 50, 60, 70 hours into just slowly exploring and working my through this massive world and doing all these different things and getting lost in side quests and collectibles and kind of just exploring off the beaten path. And I think Halo is a franchise that really could justify that, more so than a lot of other franchises that feel the need to go open world all of a sudden. So again, I guess similar to the Battle Royale thing, it's like there's a bit of hesitation, because that's not what Halo traditionally is. But if they can pull it off and show us why it needs to be open world, then I'm excited to see it. So there's a very long answer to your question. I appreciate that. As for my Disney thing, I won't harp on that too long. I know this isn't a Disney podcast, but actually my Disney obsession stems actually from my love for theme parks. Always loved Disney World. Yeah, actually, as you may know, because I sometimes say on the podcast, I live here in Orlando, Florida, literally 10 minutes from Walt Disney World. I moved here as soon as I graduated college because I couldn't stand the thought of not living as close as possible to Walt Disney World. I visited this place once as a kid, fell in love with it, made it my mission to come back here as an adult, did so as soon as I had a car and disposable income and a means of doing so, and just haven't stopped coming ever since. And so my love for Disney really stems more from my love of theme parks, and obviously when it comes to theme parks, no one does it better than Disney. So, my love for Disney theme parks has, in turn heightened my love of Disney movies. I definitely really enjoy Disney movies, especially more so from the animated side of it, Disney and Pixar. And I'm definitely there watching and following alongside. And I know a fair amount about all the other aspects of Disney, but really my love for Disney stems from the theme parks. I think theme parks are, aside from video games, it's my biggest love. In fact, I'd actually probably say theme parks are my number one love. Video games are actually my number two, but video games are much more accessible and easy to enjoy and kind of hobby, whereas theme parks are a little more expensive and time consuming and kind of a thing you have to make a bigger effort to enjoy. But I love theme parks for the same reason I love video games, because I think theme parks are a medium of art and storytelling that are greatly underappreciated and greatly overlooked, and that there's a potential to immerse and to tell and to connect with audiences in a way that people constantly just miss and overlook and forget about. I think obviously, the novel is probably the most regarded. Literature in general is the most highly regarded form of art and storytelling when it comes to, conveying a narrative and bringing a reader along a story and kind of bringing them into a world. And I think cinema has definitely gotten to the point where I think it's not as well regarded from like a sophisticated philosophical and scholarly kind of perspective, but I think general audiences pretty clearly love movies and respect them pretty well, and we have things like the Academy, of course, to recognize great movies and things like that. And I'm happy to see that video games have really become that in the past 10 years or so, or they're trying to take themselves seriously enough these days to see that they're also a very serious and important form of immersion and storytelling and world building. But I think video games still have a long ways to get to where they need to be. And unfortunately, I think video games are trying too hard to kind of follow the movie industry beat for beat and try to do what they do when it comes to like recognizing art and talent in the games industry, which I think is kind of a missed opportunity, because honestly, in my opinion, I think video games are just like so far and wide, like a vastly superior mode of storytelling and immersion in world building than movies. They're just like infinitely better. And I think Hollywood in particular is just kind of so disgustingly up its own ass. It's kind of obnoxious. Movies are actually, quite honestly, my least favorite form of art and storytelling, because I can't stand the mass majority of movies that come out. And I find, the kind of Hollywood mantra, everything from like actors to writers to directors, I kind of find 90% of Hollywood people to just be so like painfully obnoxious that I can't even, as the kids say, with most of that shit. So I do wish the video games industry would kind of recognize what makes it unique and kind of find its own way to celebrate its industry. But yeah, I think theme parks are similar to games, but are at an even greater disadvantage, to where it's, you think of like a theme park, like everyone knows Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Like these are world famous theme parks. These are, the textbook definition of a theme park. Everyone thinks about Disney first and foremost, right? People come from all over the world to come to Disney theme parks. And so they get a lot of money and attention, these great places for families to vacation, and everyone goes there at least once in their lifetime, as it's told. But that doesn't distract from the fact that I think people greatly overlook how amazing theme parks are and the potential they have for really bringing people into the world. If books are amazing because reading a book does the best job of getting you into the head of a character, I think theme parks do the number one best job of quite literally bringing you into the world of a universe or something like that. Video games give you the direct control and agency over the characters, because what happens in the game is all up to you. And I think it's awesome that these different mediums and modes of storytelling and art offer different ways to really explore these things. That's what's kind of cool about the whole idea of taking a property and making it crossing different mediums. Like when you have something like Halo, and it's like, oh, we kind of want to make a movie about it, but we have books about it, and it's a game series. Even though most times those things don't pan out, I like the idea of that, just because you need different modes of art and storytelling to explore these different aspects in greater detail. And I think theme parks just get so overlooked, and Disney does the best job of really exploring these modes of storytelling and entertainment, because you go to a Disney park, and at least for me, I think they really do the best job at making you leave the real world behind and enter this new universe. It's the same reason why, when I'm playing Halo, I love forgetting about the outside world and believing and taking serious this ridiculous, heinous world of Halo, where we're in the 26th century, and there's these genetically enhanced super soldiers, Spartans, and we have this slip space technology that's allowed us to travel to different galaxies and solar systems and shit, and we're at war with this alien race or these various alien races under one alliance. And I think that's such a cool world to explore. But I think about like, well, what if there was like a Halo land at a theme park? That'd be so amazing, because then you could explore Halo in a way that games don't allow you to. You could really explore the world in a way where you as a physical human being are walking around and interacting with that environment in a way that games don't allow you to. And, games allow you the opportunity to be Master Chief and to control him and to shoot aliens. But when you go to a theme park, you have the ability to literally step foot on the grounds of that universe, and to touch objects in that universe, and to eat the food that exists in that universe, and to go on a ride where you're like put in the action of something that would happen in that universe. And I think theme parks are doing the best job they've ever done with that. You know, like Disney World here in Orlando, we have a whole land dedicated to James Cameron's Avatar, which is just like the most amazing, breathtaking, immersive land in a theme park I've ever seen. It's so incredibly well thought out, and just there's so much meticulous detail, and it's just the most amazing place ever. And I think all the time when I'm there, what if this was a fucking land based on Halo? Because it's kind of the closest thing we'll ever have to a Halo theme park, because it really is a land that's entirely dedicated to this world of Pandora, which is, you know, the world from that Avatar movie that James Cameron made all those years back in 2009. And it's kind of a similar concept to Halo, where I'm like, this is a story that's all about this world. Halo is all about, you know, these Halo installations and these planets that you explore and the kind of natural life that exists within it, and the kind of whole like humanity impeding on these other planets that already existed long before we were here. And I just think it's such a missed opportunity that people don't really admire and appreciate that. And that's really what draws me to theme parks, and that's really what fuels my love for Disney. And, you know, my love for the theme parks have, you know, in effect, also heightened my love for things like Disney Infinity and Disney movies and things like that. But if that's why I bring up Disney all the time, is because I think Disney in particular, but theme parks in general, are just some of the most incredible places that just don't get the respect and attention they deserve for the immersion, the storytelling, and the world building that they can and do offer. But I appreciate you asking, because I always love an opportunity to talk about theme parks, as I don't get to really explore my passion and share my passion for that with many people otherwise. Also, just thank you for writing in. I appreciate your comment. Our next one here comes from Lindbert Bond, who says, what was your first Xbox Live multiplayer game you played online? P.S. Favorite pizza toppings are spicy chili beef, chicken, pepperoni, and jalapenos. All right, Lindbert Bond. So, first Xbox Live game you ever played online. This isn't going to be a very inspired answer, because it's probably most people's answer, but definitely Halo 2. I've said before on the show, I actually came into the Xbox original generation pretty late in the game. I was a pretty young child back then, so I had no income, no means of getting my hands on an Xbox. Luckily, my older brother mowed lawns for an entire summer to buy one off of one of his friends at school. So, you know, around the last year, right around the time Halo 2 actually came out, we got Xbox, and we got Halo Combat Evolved, and then we got Halo 2 shortly afterwards. So while I explored a lot of the OG Xbox games lineup, especially in retrospect, but most of my OG, you know, Xbox Live experiences, or OG Xbox gaming experiences in general, were centered around Halo 1 and 2. And so Halo 2 is definitely my earliest memory playing Xbox Live. And I actually remember I vastly preferred playing playing Halo local multiplayer, like with my brothers or my brother-in-law, or, you know, other people that I knew, compared to online, because one, I sucked dick online, and I still do to this day, and two, because I was always pretty intimidated by like other people with headsets. You know, this is back in the era where people actually were in, you know, lobby chat communicating with strangers, and so it was always pretty intimidating to me that people were like actually talking. It just felt like a real social situation, and I wanted no part of that. But I also remember just being so blown away by Xbox Live and thinking it was just the coolest thing to be able to interact with games in this new way that was completely foreign to me. So yeah, definitely Halo 2, but that's a weird throwback to think about. As for your pizza toppings here, Lindbert Bond, you mentioned spicy chili beef. I don't want you to think I'm judging you. I've just literally never heard of that as a pizza topping, so I guess maybe I just need to look into it. But spicy chili beef, it's I'm not gonna. Hey, I said the other week I won't knock it till I try it. I'm open minded, especially when it comes to pizza. But that's a new topping for me. Now, chicken, you say, I do love chicken. We talked about this, so I appreciate you having a similar opinion to me. Pepperoni, of course, classic, and you say jalapenos. Jalapenos are fine on pizza to me. I'm not a big jalapeno guy, but I'll eat them if they're there, but I'll never opt to put them on something. So interesting choices there. I do appreciate you sharing your pizza toppings with me. My mother writes in and she says, chicken, bacon, onions, and pineapple with garlic parmesan. Yum. I think those are her pizza toppings. Either that, or maybe she's just cooking and she's writing the ingredients to her recipe on Google or on YouTube here. I don't really know what's happening, but thank you for writing in, Mother. And then next we've got Lethal Migraine coming in with a couple comments. He goes, if they're making a perfect Dark game, it needs to be a cross between Deus Ex, Splinter Cell, with Joanna Dark being bigger and more badass than Lara Croft. That's exactly what I was looking for the other week when someone asked what I would want a perfect Dark game to be. I think it's a pretty good response there. Also, Joanna Dark, that was the name. I forgot. I think I called her Jill last week. So I apologize to the fictional character of Joanna Dark. I got your name now, thanks to Lethal Migraine. He also says, will you please post that waffle iron link? Sounds like something right up my alley. As for waffles versus pancakes, waffles 100 out of 100 times. So last week I told you that I got this Cars 3 Lightning McQueen waffle iron maker, and it was incredible. And then Lethal Migraine here was interested in it, so I sent him the Amazon link for it. I told him to get ready for next generation breakfast, and he says, thanks, I'm buying that for sure. I love cars. So Lethal Migraine, if you're out there listening, just know that the fact that you are an Xbox fan and you love Disney Pixar's Cars makes me extremely erect for you, and that's just a double whammy. I feel like it seems like no one I meet gives a shit about Xbox, and no one I meet ever likes Cars. Cars is like the most divisive Pixar movie of all time. I think it's a greatly underappreciated and overlooked Pixar movie. I think people don't like it because they don't get it. I think people always look for Pixar because Pixar movies are always like super character driven, and they're tearjerkers because they're about these characters you get really attached to. And while Cars certainly has the characters, I think people miss what's so great about Cars, and it's that Cars is a setting story, not a character story. And if you really watch the first Cars movie in particular from the perspective of a piece of like a remembrance and kind of a romanticism of like this classic West Coast California car culture circa like the 1960s and so on, I think it's a really emotional and touching story that people just constantly gloss over because they just see it as like Lightning McQueen, Ka-Chow, Tow Mater, and they're missing the point, man. But Cars 3, also an incredible movie. That one's definitely more of a character-focused story, and I would say it's equally as great as the first one. Goddamn, I fucking love Cars, and I really appreciate you saying that, Lethal Migraine. Now, as for your preference, I asked last week, I said, what do you guys think, waffles or pancakes? Lethal Migraine is definitely a waffle guy, so I'm excited to see. In our next comment here, Mr. Sarugi1 comes back, and he says, waffles versus pancakes? Pancakes in the morning, waffles for desserts. I really appreciate this comment, Sarugi, because you took my question and you spun it on its head and made me think about it in a way I hadn't considered before, and it kind of blew my brain because I think in this subjective question of waffles versus pancakes, I think you've provided an objectively correct answer, which is that, I told you I've always been a pancake guy through and through from start to finish, but lately I've been really feeling the waffle. And I think this kind of really encapsulates the correct answer and really gives proper respect where due to each I don't know what you would call a waffle or pancake, a pastry, not a pastry, a thing, a carb-loaded breakfast item, whatever. But the pancake is I love the idea of a pancake stack in the morning. You got your eggs and your bacon and whatever things you eat in the morning, but the pancakes are there. They're at the center of it all. I love that. But the waffle really is an incredible dessert option. And you think about it, it's more than just like, it's just so versatile compared to pancakes, right? Because you could do the savory thing, you can do the chicken and waffles, you can do the dessert thing, you can do like a loaded waffle. There's like these Korean bakeries back home where I'm from in Atlanta where they do like these fucking fluffy ass amazing Belgium style waffles, and then they put like this amazing whipped cream and matcha powder and green tea ice cream and all this like fruits and shit on top, and they're fucking amazing. And then you think about, but you can also like think about an ice cream cone. You get a waffle cone on it. That's a waffle there. And then you think about like just all the things you can do with waffles, and it just extends so far beyond a breakfast item. So while pancakes I think are probably my go-to in a general sense, waffles have so much versatility. It's a great breakfast item, but it can also be used in a savory sense or a dessert sense. And I think that really gives waffles an upper hand that I hadn't considered before. Is that they're not only so delicious, but where they really kind of have the upper hand for pancakes is that they're so damn versatile. And that's I think that's really the takeaway for this whole episode. And if it weren't for the fact that I'm obligated to tell you about the news, I would probably just stop right there. But I do appreciate that comment. Our next one here comes from our OG commenter, Mr. Dead Captain James, who says, unpopular opinion, Halo 4 was my favorite. Halo 5 was the best for multiplayer. Dead Captain James, unpopular opinion, who cares? That was a great take. It's a beautiful take, and I appreciate you commenting, as I always appreciate you commenting, and mostly I'm just really glad to see someone giving 343 Halo some love, because I think 343 was tasked with like the biggest, the like the most daunting task of all time, which is carry the torch that Bungie handed to you of Halo and just bring it into the future and make it great. And I don't envy anyone who has to, follow up a game like Halo 3 or a game like Halo Reach. So the fact that Halo 4 was not only a great game, but just offered, in my opinion, the most I agree with you completely. The most compelling story in a Halo game is amazing. I just think, Halo 3 is this grand climax. It's this grand finale of this game trilogy that's all about this massive, large scale battle war between the human race and these various alien factions that's come together under one like religious kind of tyrannical force that's just so overpowered by comparison of the humans. And to see that kind of come to a close in this big finale with all this action and all these plot points being tied up and all these loose ends kind of coming together for this massive finale that was Halo 3, I think the coolest way you could have possibly followed that up, especially after the large gap left between Halos 3 and 4, is to say, okay, now we're gonna to evolve Halo, we're actually gonna just dial everything back and zoom all the way in on what makes Halo the most important, which is this character story of like this man who's a machine and this machine that's a human. And this Cortana Master Chief story that they did in Halo 4, I think is just so ingenious. It's my favorite story in the Halo universe. I really love that through line of Cortana just being this computer AI that's just so emotive and capable and advanced that she's basically just a human, and of Master Chief being this this biological from birth human being that's just been modified and fucked with and mentally just manipulated and twisted and used his entire life, that he might as well just be the robot. And just kind of exploring that weird like isolation feeling between Cortana and Chief, and that they kind of only have each other and they're stuck out in the middle of nowhere on this mission. It's just kind of about how one isn't really themselves without the other, because Chief needs his humanity that he gets from Cortana, and Cortana kind of justifies her utility as as a computer, as a tool from Chief and his militaristic kind of just see problems solved with guns and militaristic force, and just kind of seeing them rely on each other in those ways and just be so human and in need of each other is just such an amazing story. And on top of that, it really busts open the Halo universe at the same time by making the Forerunner go from like this thing that you just kind of hear whisperings about to like this thing that really is at the front and center of the Halo universe. And to see how the actions of the Forerunner and everything are, I could go on forever. I just think Halo 4 is such an incredible story that it doesn't matter what you think about the balance of the multiplayer or the opinions to add permanent run or all these things. It's like you can have your opinions about that, but when it comes from the story of Halo 4, it's just objectively the best Halo's ever been. I love it. And then I also agree with you that Halo 5 has the best multiplayer. I think Halo 5's multiplayer, whatever you think about the campaign, Halo 5's multiplayer is so fully realized, it's so fleshed out, it's so fine-tuned. Everything is so perfectly just balanced. It feels like the most modern, beautiful representation of what Halo multiplayer can be, and I love that so much. Halo 3, always going to be my favorite overall package for a Halo game. That combination of its multiplayer and its campaign together, it's got my nostalgia by the balls, and it's such a great package all together in one. But man, Halo 4 and 5 individually, those two, just like if you could mash Halo 4 and 5 into one package, that's got to be my favorite. That would be my favorite Halo game. I just think 343 does not get enough respect for how hard they worked to really make Halo their own, while also really giving the fans what they want and deserved in that franchise. And I appreciate your comment, because goddamn do I love me some 343 Halo. Wrapping up with the comments here, I swear to God, this isn't going to be an entire episode of comments, but our next one is from Mr. Lethal Migraine, who pops in again. It says it was reported in April that the Xbox Series X was already in production. If that's legit, they need to release those things in August or September, then drop the S a week or two before Black Friday. So I saw apparently murmurings that apparently it was always supposed to be, or actually we'll read. Sarugi replies to Lethal Migraine and says, I did see an article suggesting that the Xbox Series X was initially due to release in August, but it was pushed because of COVID. Shame if it's true, because I seriously doubt Sony would have been ready to ship in August to try and compete. So this is an interesting report that I'm not too familiar with. First things first, production of the Xbox Series X beginning in April. I don't doubt that. I don't know if it's true, but I don't doubt it if it is true, because that's actually pretty normal. These consoles, in terms of like their specs and their final designs, are pretty much locked in, like around a year or so before the boxes come out. So it's not improbable to think that if they were planning on releasing this thing in the fall, that they had it locked in and ready for production by late spring, mid-late spring. So that doesn't surprise me one bit if that's true, but I don't necessarily think that making or producing these units by April means that they were intended to be released in August. Although that being said, I don't know too much about every big tech company's process of, manufacturing to shipping, but I know Microsoft is usually pretty good about like starting production late and getting things out the door still. Like the Surface Duo, their new phone they're working on that I cannot fucking wait for it to finally come out, is like still not fully being produced right now, but the rumor is that phone's going to be out in the next month. So I don't know how Microsoft does it. I guess when you're as big as Microsoft, you get top priority at these production facilities. But yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to that idea that, the Xbox Series X was originally supposed to be out in August. I think it's kind of interesting if that's the case, and it kind of makes sense if it is, because that seems like Xbox trying to, again, get the upper hand on Sony by having more of an Xbox 360 reminiscent kind of release than an Xbox One release, where the Xbox One released within days of the PS4, but the Xbox 360 released about over a full year before the PS3, and I think that those extra months really made up so much of the difference and why 360 was so successful last generation. And if they could do that again this generation, or with these consoles, that would be another big win for them, where they'd be able to say, we're the most powerful console, we're the most affordable console, we're the most consumer friendly with Game Pass and smart delivery, and we're out before the PlayStation 5. So basically, if they were to do that, it's basically just saying, like, if you buy a PlayStation 4, I'm not saying you're stupid, but you're probably a fucking idiot. So it's all really good to have that on paper, but I don't know, man. I don't think COVID is what pushed this console back. I think what pushed us back, if anything, was the need to get some more fall releases prepped and ready to go. But I mean, I could be dead wrong about that, because Phil has said in the past that, we won't let the production of games like Halo Infinite affect the release date of the box. If Halo Infinite hypothetically got delayed, we'd still release the box when we release it, and that's just that. So I could be dead wrong, but that's some interesting insight if that's to be believed. There's no doubt in my mind, as Sergey says here, that COVID has, the biggest impact on basically everything that's happening right now. Honestly, that's my biggest concern, isn't even the Xbox Series X. I think the Xbox Series X is more than likely to come out this fall. The only thing that could really affect it would be, the state of the economy, would be, people's ability to afford it, since, especially here in the United States, we have a government that's so fucking fixated on trying to make sure that we're all fucking dirt poor and out of homes and jobs, so that our investors can afford to keep being rich, or whatever the fuck is happening. So that should be Microsoft's number one concern, is that, are we going to release this box to a market of people that can't afford to buy it because everyone's fucking out of work and we're in a Great Depression and a housing crisis? That would be my bigger concern than, beating Sony to the release by a couple months here or there, because at the end of the day, it's about, can people even afford the thing you're making, not can we beat the competition by 90 days or whatever. So that is the bigger concern here. The other thing is, I think if anything has a chance of falling through the cracks here, it's Halo Infinite. I think this whole work from home thing has probably been really straining on a team like 343 that's such a big team, and not to mention they have multiple support studios working on this game, like Splash Damage. So the fact that these teams also have to work from home, this is a massive setback, and it would not surprise me if either Halo Infinite gets delayed a little bit, or if they have to trim things to get it to launch, meaning that I wouldn't be surprised if like it launches with just like campaign and arena multiplayer, and then the battle royale mode or the Warzone mode or the firefight mode or whatever, or the Forge mode or whatever comes in a couple more months, because they weren't able to get everything out the door in time due to COVID. So that wouldn't surprise me as much. But our final comment here, promise we're almost done, and this isn't a long one, so we won't meander for too long. Lethal Migraine again, my boy. I just like to read his comments. I like his comments, okay? Don't fucking judge. He says, next gen will be the first time I don't buy a PlayStation. A very weak console comparatively. Showed no games I wanted to play, and most of what they did show is coming to Xbox and PC anyway. I want frames over graphical fidelity, and the 60 to 120 FPS on Xbox over the majority 30 FPS games on PlayStation is how I want to play my games. Hell, my PC monitor does 240 FPS. I will be hooking up my Series X to that as well. Interesting you said, because I've been thinking about not buying a 4K TV for my Xbox Series X and just buying a 4K monitor with a high refresh rate and everything, and just kind of plugging my Xbox up to my computer or to my computer desk and just playing consoles at a computer, like holding a controller and playing like a PC gamer but with a controller. I've been thinking about that just because I feel like that might be a more comfortable position to play in than to sit on a couch. But I don't know. I'll probably just end up buying a new TV, or yeah, I still have a 1080p TV. I got to get me a nice one for the Series X. So that's on the wish list right now. But yeah, I agree with your sentiment. While obviously most of this comment is pretty, subjective, that's your opinion. You're welcome to it. I kind of agree with you in some sense that like this is like one of the least enticing PlayStation launches I've ever seen too. I'm extremely excited for Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man Miles Morales. And if those games were on PS4, if they were cross-generational, I would absolutely just play them on PS4 and then not buy a PS5 for many years. I just wait for it to get cheap and then buy one. But I agree. Other than those two games, I feel like the Xbox Series X is just clobbering the PS5 by comparison of like value and what you're getting, because I'm also in a similar boat where I always say I don't give a shit about graphical fidelity. I want the game to look good, but it doesn't have to look mind-blowing. But I'm in a similar boat where I'm getting in the camp of like frame rates matter to me, especially because right now I use a Razer Phone 2. That's one of the few phones on the market right now that can do a 120 FPS frame rate, or sorry, it has a 120 hertz refresh rate, and it's just kind of, that screen in general has just kind of opened my eyes to like how much I care about the screen quality and the fidelity of my screen. And so if I have a console that can't push a high frame rate and a TV that can't handle a good refresh rate and things like that, it's really going to start hindering my enjoyment of next generation games. Because I think those are the things that make the difference, right? It's like, can your TV support HDR and 4K and 120, can your console do 120 frames per second? Does your TV have a high enough refresh rate? Because I think these are the things that really make next gen feel next gen, is the amalgamation of that rather than the game just having nicer graphics. Back in the PS2 days, it didn't matter if I was using a shitty TV left over from 1994 or if I was using a brand new tube TV from 2002. It's like the game looked good because the graphics were good. There wasn't much else to it. But I feel like these days, it is about the combination of like the screen you're using and the console performance and things like that. And so there's just more factors to play. But I kind of agree that the PS5, just with the exception of a few games, the PS5 looks overall pretty not bad. It just doesn't speak to me personally enough for me to like have to get one day one. But I think that I see that as a good thing, because I don't need an excuse to buy another big expensive toy. I would like to have an excuse to wait for it to drop in price, as I did with my PS4. I waited until Uncharted 4 and Horizon Zero Dawn were a thing before I went and pulled the trigger on that, and I saved a bunch of money by waiting. So probably do the same thing with the PS5. And that's going to do it for all of our comments, shout-outs, whatever. We're an hour into the show, and all we've done is gone over comments and talked about why I love Disney World. So two things, as always, don't forget, don't be shy, reply. Second of all, if anything about my talking and bantering about theme parks excited you, just remember, if enough of you guys give me the thumbs up and the green light, we will switch this podcast into an Epcot fanboy podcast. We'll talk about 80s Walt Disney World all over the place if you want to do that. We'll just make this podcast about, listen, my dream podcast is not an Xbox podcast. It's a combination. It's an equal parts combination of fast food conversation, Sonic the Hedgehog, Halo, Microsoft Surface, and 80s Disney, Epcot in particular. Like, if I could have a podcast just about those things only, oh my god, this would be the most enthusiastic podcast you'd ever hear in your life. But anyway, now we're gonna jump away from the comments and questions, and we're gonna talk about what I've been playing. But before I can tell you what I've been playing, I gotta tell you what I've been eating. And this week I have an exciting one for you. I found this recipe online to make homemade Philly cheesesteaks, and I wasn't too big a believer, and I didn't think it was going to yield the greatest sandwich of all time. My personal experience cooking is that I look for a recipe, I try it out, it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's pretty good, sometimes it's pretty bad. But these were like phenomenal Philly cheesesteaks. Let me tell you what. I can post a recipe of these if you're into it, but it's fantastic. Check out my Instagram if you want, my Instagram story if you need to see how these look. But it's an amazing Philly cheesesteak recipe with super simple, all this shit. You just throw it on a baking sheet, you cook it, you broil it, you season it, you chop it all up, you throw some provolone, you melt the cheese, you mix it all up, you get these hoagie rolls, you butter them up, you grill them a little bit. It's fucking amazing. And I got the air fryer which I've talked about many times before on the show. Then you go to the grocery store, you can buy either Arby's or Checkers fries in the frozen food aisle. Throw them in the air fryer, tastes just as good as a drive-thru. Boom, you serve them with your Philly cheesesteak. It's fantastic. I just had the Philly cheesesteak is one of those sandwiches that I have such a deep love and passion for. Of course, I don't get mine with mushrooms because I'm not a heathen, but I love the bell peppers and the grilled onions and the provolone cheese. And even though it's already so fucking oily, and if you did your hoagie roll right, you buttered it and you grilled it a little bit to make it crispy and buttery and warm, but I still say I don't give a shit. There's all this oil from the meat and the cheese and the butter or the oil, the cooking oil, but throw some mayonnaise on there too. Fucking go all out. Make it a fucking cardiac arrest sandwich. I love it. You just, oh man, such a good sandwich. And I never have them enough because, especially since I moved here to Orlando, I don't know where the hell you go to get a good Philly cheesesteak, and I'm super excited to have this recipe now under my belt. I think this will be an excellent way, alongside with my air fried chicken wings and my frozen pizzas and everything and my Taco Bell. This will be a great way to accelerate my journey to heart disease, and just fucking delicious. Shout out to the Philly cheesesteak. Shout out to the recipe I used this week, although I don't remember the name of the website, but just a generic shout out into the ether. Gotta love the Philly cheesesteak. Let me know what you think about hot subs, hot sandwiches. What's your go-to? I do love that Philly cheesesteak. And now we will quickly go over what I've been playing this week. It has been a Halo week. I had a 3-day weekend due to the holiday. We had a little bit of a holiday here in the States this past week. It didn't feel like a holiday because I stayed inside the entire time due to COVID. And I checked Twitter, and just everyone was yelling at each other, calling everyone a racist, because I guess that's what the world's come to these days. So it didn't feel like a holiday, but I still had a great day because I tuned the world out and replayed all of Halo Wars 2 in one day, or all of the main campaign. I did all the DLC the next day. I'm not that crazy. But yeah, I played through all of Halo Wars 2 over that weekend, and a little bit of Master Chief Collection. I played some Halo 4 multiplayer. But yeah, Halo Wars 2, it's the first time I played it since the game came out. It's the first time since I played the campaign since the game came out. And I gotta say, first of all, obviously I was doing this because I wanted to refresh myself with the story of the Banished as I get excited over Halo Infinite. But god damn, Halo Wars 2 is such a good game. Not only from a narrative perspective, where the cutscenes are beautifully done by Blur Studios, and the story is awesome, the Banished are such a badass faction of enemies, and Aatrox is such a badass villain, and I think the Spirit of Fire and the whole team, the Spartan team, the ODSTs, and everyone in that story is just so cool. I love Alice and Jerome. They're awesome Spartans. I love Cutter and all the Spirit of Fire team. I just think it's such a great cast of characters, and honestly such a fucking cool story. It's I love that follow up, or that continuation of the OG Halo Wars story, and the whole like them finding a new Halo ring, and then the spoiler alert at the end where they come in contact with the Guardians, and just such a fucking cool game, honestly. And the level variety is so interesting for an RTS. It's not just as simple as like build a base, destroy the enemy base, level over. There's so much variety in the formula of the RTS genre in that game. There's just so many levels where you just do different things, different kinds of objectives, different kinds of twists on the formula of the traditional RTS. And I just think it's such a replayable and fun game. Criminally underrated, man. I think that's pretty well known that game did not sell very well, which is just such a shame, because it really is fun. I think Halo Wars is such a great sub franchise. Halo was, of course, famously supposed to be an RTS to begin with, and then it ended up being a first-person shooter instead. And I just think it's so cool that they kind of went back and were like, oh, well, we are going to make the RTS Halo game, and that was Halo Wars 1. And the fact that I ever even got a sequel is just so cool to me. But that's what I played this past week. And with that all said, we will jump into our news. Our first story here, and our biggest story of the week that really doesn't have too much for us to divulge, is that Microsoft has announced that the Xbox Series X Games Showcase for July will be hosted on Thursday the 23rd, meaning I'll be at work, so I won't be able to see it until after I get home. But during the live stream, Xbox will showcase a variety of first-party titles headed for the Series X, including the game that we all really care about, Halo Infinite. The stream will begin at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, the only time zone that matters. And I already wrote this down apparently. I said, while I'm at work because Microsoft hates me and no longer wishes to do their big summer events on Sundays like they used to. I already mentioned that. And so just interesting to see, of course, that this event will literally take place one day after Mixer shuts down, which is just funny as shit. It's like their way of saying, like, now we don't have to stream on Mixer. So, of course, don't expect there to be any kind of Mixer stream for this event because we will be 24 hours removed from the death of Mixer when this show takes place. But it's okay. We'll just we'll cover that up with the excitement of Halo Infinite. And then also note that this podcast you're listening to will be delayed by one day that week to accommodate the event. Obviously the show goes live every Thursday because I record on Wednesday nights. So I will record on Thursday night so it can go live on Friday so that we can accommodate all the news from the show. I will remind you of that again next week as we get closer to the event. But yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about this story. This is obviously the big Xbox news that happened this week, but it's just setting a date and place for this event. Obviously, the internet was lit up. People were super hyped and exciting, and now we're starting to see these potentially leaked schedule, like lists of like, oh, this is what's going to be shown. This is what they're going to do at the show. I'm trying to avoid that stuff. I don't know if there's any legitimacy to any of it, but definitely exciting because we've been waiting for this for so long, and July is just such a big month for Microsoft where it's like, finally we're going to see the games. That's the most important thing about your consoles. The games will play on it. Finally, we're going to see Halo Infinite, which is undoubtedly the most important thing happening in the world right now, without a doubt. Of course, the rumor is we're going to get a release date and some more information on the Microsoft Surface Duo. So that's also very exciting. July is just a very exciting time for Xbox fans and Microsoft fans alike. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I put this at the top because it's the big thing, but I don't really have anything to say other than the hype is definitely palpable. It seems like people are just super fucking pumped for this event, and there's a lot riding on Microsoft to really pull this thing off. I was talking with someone on Twitter this week about kind of the event, and he's saying how like he wants for Microsoft to win him over. He really wants the Xbox Series X to be a thing that makes him say, well, I have to have this thing. I can't ignore it. And he's a PlayStation gamer, so I thought this was really cool that, that's just like a little microcosm, a little example of how people are like genuinely palpably excited about what Microsoft's doing, what Xbox is doing. And I think that's really important to note because this is the first time Xbox as a brand has had the floor and had the attention of the games industry like this, arguably since the Xbox One was revealed, right? Because it seems like, even though the Xbox One was a botched, start, it came out the gate bruised and broken already. But basically the whole generation was just Phil Spencer starting from scratch, starting from where Don Matrix left the whole thing and saying, I'm going to have to build this brand up from a tarnished, beat up, disrespected brand to something people really revere and love again. And that's really exactly what he's done. And I'd argue that the Xbox One generation has been pretty fantastic overall because of Phil Spencer and because of his team and because of the way they've turned everything around, the narrative surrounding the Xbox One. But in a lot of ways, it was just too little too late for the masses. What's really exciting about this is it feels like the general audience is really taking notice of the fact that Microsoft has a new console and this new event with all these new games, and everyone's excited or at least curious to see what's going on here. And I think that's a really great opportunity because it means if Microsoft can really nail this and not fuck up, which I'm very confident they're going to nail it, but if they can really nail this, I think that's a great opportunity to get some lapsed Xbox gamers back on your platform. Or at the very least, get people who are just constantly shitting on Xbox and laughing it out the door to at least take it a little more serious. And I don't need Xbox to be taken seriously because I need to be validated as a fan, but I just mean this as a fan of Xbox who wants to see the brand do well. I want to see that Phil Spencer and his team's incredible hard work at Xbox is paying off and that they do well financially so that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, doesn't fucking cut off the Xbox brand like Mixer or Zune or Groove Music or Windows Phone and just let it fucking sink to the bottom of the ocean. I want to see the hard work from all these teams in Xbox and just see it really come to fruition and capture an audience and make people really love Xbox again and make Xbox a really serious competitor to Nintendo and Sony and make people, just take it serious as a third competitor. Again, not because I need to be validated as a fan, but because I think this is too good of a brand and too good of a console, and they're too good of exclusive games for for them to just not do well financially. And I understand Xbox does very well financially with or without, despite the woes of the Xbox One generation, Xbox as a brand is still very profitable, and I think Microsoft has every intention of keeping it around. But you don't want Xbox to do well and live in the shadow of PlayStation. You want it to do great and to really give the PlayStation a run for its money. And that's how you know it's a healthy and profitable brand. Isn't necessarily just by the amount of money it's pulling in at the end of the day, but also the amount of cachet the brand has and the kind of the respect it has as a brand. And, not only having it be highly profitable and well respected, but to have it be extremely profitable and to be kind of a ubiquitous brand that everyone loves and knows. And that's what Xbox is working to get to, and obviously that's the whole point of Project xCloud and Game Pass and having Xbox available in different tiers that makes it more accessible for more audiences. But I think this is a really important step of that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how cheap your new console is. It doesn't matter how great of a deal Game Pass is. None of that fucking matters if your first-party content isn't exciting and enticing and captivating. And that's what this event's all about. It's saying, listen, people aren't going to give a shit about ever giving Series S a try, no matter how affordable it is, or giving Game Pass a free trial if they don't have an Xbox to play it on, if they don't have the urge or the temptation to go and buy an Xbox to begin with. And that's why we need Halo Infinite to deliver, and whatever the coalition's working on or Halo Infinite to deliver, and whatever the initiative's working on to deliver, and all these other studios and Everwild from Rare and all these games. We just need to see them. We need to see, that this is more exciting than what we got this past generation. We need to know that what we're about to get is leaps and bounds more interesting than Crackdown 3, So a lot riding on Microsoft, but I'm excited to see them pull it off. I'm very, very confident that this is going to be a great show, and I'm not saying that to drum up hype. I'm saying that because I would love to see you all get your hopes and dreams crushed if this doesn't go well. Our next story here is that shortly after our show went up this past week, this is a huge one, 2K Games announced that NBA 2K21 will retail for the standard $59.99 price tag on the Xbox One, the same price that games have been for the past 15 plus years. However, the Xbox Series X version of the game will retail for $69.99. This is, of course, sparked, immediate concern throughout the games industry, as gamers expect everything to be cheap forever. But additionally, 2K Games confirmed that they will not be supporting smart delivery, saying that, quote, "It's something we're interested in, but NBA 2K21 will not support smart delivery." In the days that followed the news of $70 games, research firm IDG Consulting said that they suspect that game publishers will consider the price increase for their games as well, suggesting that $70 may become the new standard for game pricing, beginning with the new console generation this fall. From IGN, speaking with GamesIndustry.biz, IDG President CEO Yoshi Osaki explained how game pricing is, quote, "remained flat since 2005, whereas TV and movie prices have increased significantly. The last time that next-gen launch software pricing went up was in 2005 and 2006, when it went from $50 to $60 at the start of the Xbox 360 PS3 generation," Osaki says. During that time, the costs and prices in other affiliated verticals have gone up significantly. These other affiliated verticals include next-gen console game production costs, which have seen increases of 200 to 300%, depending on the IP, studio, and game genre, without the increase of price of games. For comparison's sake, cinema ticket prices for movies have risen 39%, Netflix subscription costs have gone up 100%, and cable TV packages have risen 105%. Even with the increases to $70 for next-gen games, the price increase from 05 to 2020 next-gen is only up by about 17%, far lower than the other comparisons, Osaki continued. While the costs of development and publishing have gone up, and pricing in other entertainment verticals has also gone up substantially, next-gen software pricing has not reflected the increases. $60 to $70 does not cover these other cost increases completely, but does move it more in the proper direction, end quote. He concludes by stating that not every game should garner the $70 price point on next-gen consoles, but flagship AAA games such as NBA 2K merit the pricing more than others. So this is, first of all, Mr. Osaki here got into a lot of what I was going to say, but I saw his quotes and he said a lot more eloquently than I would have, so I felt it necessary to include this. But this is a huge deal, and I think something that's been brought up on the show before, but I've been a firm believer of for a long time that I didn't know that games were, I mean, I'm not an insider, I don't fucking know, but I wasn't confident for a fact that game prices were going to go up this generation, but I was confident that bumping up game prices was the right move. And I guess we don't know that was the right move yet because it hasn't officially happened yet, but we know that it's going to happen. And so this doesn't surprise me. And this is, in my opinion, this is actually great news. I'm really excited to see this happening. And I know that might turn some of you off or upset some of you guys, but I actually think this is really, really important because you have to think about how much, I mean, Osaki gets into all of it here. So there's not too much for me to say, but it's exactly what he's talking about, which is the fact that people act like video games are so goddamn expensive, but go back in time to like the NES days and go back to the N64 days and things like this, where first of all, games didn't have an industry standard. There were games that were $50, $60, $80. Games varied wildly in pricing. And nowadays, it's as simple as like, if you are a main release, whether it be AAA, AA, whatever, your game's going to be $60. That's it. I don't give a shit if you're fucking Red Dead Redemption 2 or fucking Crash Bandicoot Insane and Trilogy, which are like vastly different games. One is a remake of some old PS1 games, and one is like the most ambitious, large-scale, open-world video game ever made in the history of humankind. And both of them are just randomly worth $60, which is, and I don't think games should be priced according to the amount of time you can spend in it or whatever, but it's the fact that you think about the budgets of these games and how expensive it is to make a game in 2020 compared to like 2004. You think about a game like the original like God of War, which is a game that was like famously made in like 8 to 16 months, somewhere in that range. It's like, This isn't how games were made anymore. NES games used to be made in like 4 to 12 weeks. It's like that's not how games work. Games are a way bigger deal than even movies. You think about movies, it's not unusual to see like the biggest summer blockbuster has a budget of like $200 million. It's like that's not that unheard of, to be honest. We see movies with $300 million budgets and shit like that. It's not that uncommon, but those movies make their money back. And a big way movies make their money back is, of course, through merchandising as well. But in the games industry, these games are like, on average, more expensive than movies. You think about your average movie, which is like $100 million or something to make, whatever. And it's just fucking mind-blowing that, these movies are made, and movies are a bad example because it's bullshit. The reason why they're so expensive to make, they're expensive to make because Hollywood's up their own ass insisting on filming in expensive locations, and because actors and producers and directors and writers are so self-important that they all have to make absurd quantities of money to do what they do, which, I don't give a shit. That's if you can make that much money doing what you do, more power to you. But like, you think about that, it's like the reason why those things are expensive is because people are self-important and deserve a lot of money in those respective roles. But you think about gaming, it's like the reason why gaming is expensive isn't because, game developers and game studios that make successful games do make good livings. Game developers are paid handsomely, for games. People who worked on games like Call of Duty and Red Dead Redemption make great money. I'm not going to lie about that, but it's because these teams are fucking massive and requires so many artistic disciplines to come together to make one project. And they require years and years and years. You can't just go on site and film a video game for 4 to 6 months and be done with it and then just post-process and edit the whole fucking thing in 2 months and throw out a trailer and there you go, you have your millionth fucking Marvel movie of the year. That's not how games work. It's like there's so much pre-production and writing and developing and coding, and people build engines just for games. And then there's art, so there's like 7,000 types of art disciplines and sound design and QA and voice actors and mocap and all these things that go into making games. And that's why games have gone from, it takes a year to make a game, to it takes 5 years, 6 years to make a big AAA game. That's why we used to get Grand Theft Auto 3, San Andreas, and Vice City within a couple years of each other, because they were comparatively super easy to make. But now you think of a game like Grand Theft Auto 5, it's like, holy shit, we're not going to get Grand Theft Auto 6 until our grandchildren have grandchildren, because these games take forever to make. Yet gamers just sit back and have this mentality that like, fucking ridiculous. $60 for a brand new game. That's fucking bullshit. Listen, I'm sensitive to the fact that not everyone is just loaded with fucking extra cash walking around ready to blow on whatever they want. And I understand that there are a lot of gamers out there that are young. I remember what it was like being a young gamer, where I was too young to have a job and I always wanted to play this game or this game, and I just didn't have access to it because I didn't have money and my parents weren't just pumping me with whatever I wanted. It was like, I understand that plight, if you will. I understand that sentiment, and I'm sensitive to it. I understand it sucks. I remember remember like being a kid, it's like, oh wow, literally my only opportunities to play a new game are Christmas and birthday, or if one of my brothers just so happens to buy a game that I already really want to play, and then I can play it because they have it. But the fact of the matter is games are cheaper than ever before. When you take into consideration inflation and you think about like fucking Red Dead Redemption 2 costing $60 in 2018 compared to like a fucking like Final Fantasy games on the PlayStation 1 that cost like $70, whatever, you're paying substantially more money back in the 90s for those games than what you pay today. When you think about, Gears of War 1 that came out on the Xbox original in 2006, and you compare it to like a game that comes out in 2020, like The Last of Us Part 2, like the profit margin on that Gears of War game, which also took half the time to make, is substantially higher. Like when you take into account inflation, a game that costs like $60 in 2020 money is like the equivalency of a game that costs like $49 in 2006 money. So it's the fact that like games are more expensive than ever before. They take way more manpower, way more time than ever before. There's so many more disciplines that go into making a game now than ever before. Yet we just expect the price to stay flat the whole time. It's like, this is why this generation was plagued as the generation about loot boxes and season passes and all this bullshit and in-app purchases and all this crap, because these publishers knew if we ask for $70, $80 for a brand new game, then people are just going to have a bitch fit. So we need to find ways to make money. And that's why everyone went the way of like the season pass and the in-app purchase. And I'm totally sympathetic to that, to the why publishers did that. It's like they're going to fucking be shit on. I mean, and the way that's happened has changed dramatically throughout this generation. Earlier in this generation, it was always about like, buy the season pass now and get this expansion. You don't see that as much anymore. Nowadays, it's all about like the multiplayer has various seasons and you can buy like a new season every 2 months. And it's all about like cosmetic in-app purchases and shit like that. It's a very different landscape. And publishers keep having to get creative with these things because they need to make money somehow. And I'm not saying, 2K and Activision, EA, oh boohoo, they're just not making any money. It's so unfair to them. Like, these people are making hand over fist money, make no bones about it. But when you're an investor, when you are a publisher and you're going to put money into a creative project, you want to know that you're going to get a decent return on investment. And it's much harder to greenlight a $200 million video game when you don't know that you're going to make all that much money back, knowing that not only the amount of money it's going to cost up front to fund a game like that, but to know how long it's going to take to get that return on investment, right? In a movie, it's easy to justify a similar budget because that movie's in production for like 1 to 2 years max, right? But for a video game, it's a totally different story because think about those Avengers movies. Like those movies are incredible feats of CGI, incredible acting, pretty great writing, pretty awesome action and choreography, and amazing CGI. And those movies are shit out in like 5 seconds. It's fucking amazing. They make those movies like back to back to back and they just keep coming out. Can you imagine if you had that equivalency in the games industry? Like if you just had Red Dead Redemption 2, 3, and 4 come out within like 3 years, it's fucking impossible. And so when you're 2K, you're going to make hand over fist money from a new Red Dead game, but it's also hard to be like, we're going to shell out hundreds of millions of dollars for this project, but we know we won't see a return on investment for like another 6 years. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you're the one putting out the money. And I know it's easy for consumers to be like, oh, boo-hoo, they make hand over fist money because you're not sympathetic to the rich people who have to give out money, But when you think about it, it's not about being sympathetic to them. It's about understanding their position. And I think if I were in a similar position, I'd feel pretty similar. That's like, do I want to give you all this money for that I won't see any of it back for X amount of years? And it's like, what if, who knows what the industry looks like in 6 years when this game finally comes out? Who knows if this genre is still in vogue? Who knows if this fucking studio doesn't get Me Too'd and then everyone hates them and boycotts the game? Who knows if like, you'd never fucking know in this industry, especially when gamers are as finicky as they are. So it's just such a crazy concept to me that people really take umbrage with this price increase. And again, I am sympathetic to the fact that, to some people, it's like $70. I'm not saying $70 is nothing, $70 is a lot of money, but in the same breath, when you really consider it, like $70 for a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, $70 for a game like Halo Infinite, I will gladly pay that. I think, if anything, I just wish that games were willing to explore the pricing structure more broadly. I love, I talked about Disintegration the other week. I love that Disintegration, that V1 Interactive, and that Private Division Publishing were willing to say, hey, we think this game is a great $50 game. It's made by a team of 30 people. It has a decent 8-hour campaign, a kind of run-of-the-mill multiplayer suite, but something too groundbreaking. But at the same time, it's a full package, and we stand by that. It's worth at least $50. But yeah, we recognize that it's not the biggest, most polished, high quality, high fidelity game of the year $60 package. And I love that there are publishers and studios out there willing to explore the pricing tier, and I wish we did that more. I don't think it's ridiculous at all if a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 came out and was like, this game is $90, this game is $100, because you think about it, it's like, I mean, it is. I spent like 55 hours playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and walked away from it saying, I've never had an experience like that in a video game ever. That was the most next generation experience I ever had in a video game. And it's not my favorite game in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it was one of the most memorable and full and complete experiences I've ever had playing a video game, period. And I can't help but notice during every second of that playthrough how much fucking hard, painstaking work went into so many facets of that game. And I could never even begin to fathom what it would be like if I had to be responsible for anything that went into that game. I could never do a single goddamn thing that went into making that game. It's an amazing feat of artistic talent and creative vision. And to just be like, nah, fuck it, $60, everything's $60. I don't give a shit if it took 7 years. I don't give a shit if it took thousands of people to make it. I don't give a shit if it took, the work of thousands of artists coming together to create like some fucking symphony of like artistic creation on a fucking PlayStation 4 disc. $60. It's ridiculous. Developers and publishers, I think, should be more liberated, encouraged to just be like, hey, this is what we think this product is worth. And we're just going to put it out there at that price. And you tell us if it works or not by either buying the game or not buying the game. But I think it's pretty fair to say that when you spend $60 on a game like fucking Evolved, that game from Turtle Rock Studios that came out early in the generation, you're like, $60 for this half-baked multiplayer game? That's bullshit. That game should have been like $30 or $40 tops. I think $30 would have been the sweet spot, plus the in-app purchases that it had. I think that's a great place for that game. And then you play a game like Red Dead Redemption, you're like, this is only $60? Are you kidding me? It's just such an unfair standard to hold every game to across the board, as if all games are created exactly equally. It's just not fair. And so I'm a huge proponent of the $70 increase, just for the fact that we need to pump some more money into these studios, and so that publishers are willing to take bigger risks, so that people feel more confident in going big with their games. And I also think that maybe sometimes games are a little too big, and we need to be willing to scale some games back. Maybe not everything needs to be the size of Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2, but I don't know. I like that these conversations, at least in some form or fashion, are starting to be had. The other big thing here is that smart delivery is not supported on NBA 2K21, which is kind of all but confirming that, at least for now, 2K is not taking smart delivery serious, which is a big loss for Xbox, and something we need to... This is going to be what makes or breaks smart delivery as a feature, is who supports it and who doesn't. And we already know some people aren't supporting it. EA isn't supporting it. We know now 2K isn't supporting it, and these are some really big publishers, so that's not good. Last note on this, Lethal Migraine had a comment. I thought I'd plug it in here instead of at the top of the show because it's related to this story in particular. He says, it came out today that next-gen NBA 2K is going to be $70. If next-gen games are going to cost more, Game Pass and Xbox are going to look even better to consumers. I think this is a great point, and I hadn't even considered it until you wrote this, Lethal Migraine, but that's exactly right. Game Pass is going to look so incredible. Again, that's why so much rides on this July event in a few weeks, because if the games look incredible, if what you see is, wow, Halo Infinite looks amazing, and Everwild looks amazing, and whatever Obsidian's working on looks amazing, and the next Gears game looks amazing, whatever fucking all these studios are working on look like excellent games, and wow, Xbox is a really powerful console, and wow, it's more affordable than PlayStation. Oh, it comes out this soon, and wow, it's just, what a great package overall. And then you're throwing the curveball of, oh, and games are going up by $10 a game now. Oh, but if you have Xbox, you just buy Game Pass and you just get all the games for a monthly subscription service. And it's like, shit, why am I not buying an Xbox again? I don't want to pay more money for games. I don't want to, play on an inferior powered console that's just as expensive, if not more. So this is actually a great opportunity for Xbox to capitalize, because if we see this happen in the coming months, that Activision's like, yeah, our games are $70. EA, our games are $70. Everyone, Bethesda, our games are $70. PlayStation, our games are $70 on PlayStation 5. And then Microsoft's like, yeah, our games are $70 on Xbox, but just get Game Pass instead and don't pay for any of them. And it's like, shit. God damn, Microsoft, is there anything you can't do? And then we all give Phil Spencer a pat on the back, and we ice him with a beer, and we tell him to chug it, and he chugs it, and he's all our bro, and then we turn our hats backwards, and we cheer because we're all a bunch of frat boys, and that's what we're looking at here. So our next story. Coming back to that Warner Bros. Story from a few weeks ago, it was reported, of course, not too long ago that's a report suggesting that AT&T was looking to potentially sell off Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment in an effort to reduce their debt. Originally, it seemed that Ubisoft and Activision were included as potential buyers, but now reports are surfacing that Microsoft is also an interested party. The possibility of Microsoft acquiring WB Interactive makes sense, considering that the company has been on a game dev buying binge in recent years to beef up their first-party offerings. If acquired, Microsoft would gain the talent of studios such as Rocksteady, NetherRealm, Monolith, and Avalanche Software. I had to add that in for myself. If this new report from The Information is to be believed, Microsoft could be on the verge of massively increasing their already impressive lineup of first-party studios. So this story was making the rounds and kind of going nuts, especially in the Xbox community, understandably so. But there's really not too much to it. It's just kind of like this vague notion from The Information, an outlet I've never heard of before. That's not to say they're not big. I just haven't heard of them. But basically just kind of saying that Microsoft is reportedly an interested buyer. So I guess, just from that vagueness, it seems like they're no more or less interested as far as we know than Ubisoft is or than Activision is. So I don't know how much of, an upper hand they have on the other potential buyers to swoop in and get this acquisition. But this would be a massive get for Microsoft. And I remember, I know the other week I was saying, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope Microsoft doesn't buy them. I hope this isn't a thing. But the more I think about this, the more it's like, I don't know, I kind of want to double down on my thing that Microsoft should not buy this, because my first thing is Microsoft, a few years ago when they bought all these new studios, they went on a massive binge and they more than doubled their studio count. And that's great. But I think now is the time for Microsoft to put these studios to the test and to stop throwing the money around, right? This isn't Mixer. Stop giving Ninja millions of dollars for a service isn't going to be saved by him alone. So don't go off and just spend all this money on WB when you don't even know that Compulsion Games or Undead Labs or any of these other studios you just acquired are really gonna turn things around for you. So let's first make sure that all these new people you got under your belt are really gonna bring in the money and really gonna kick up the fire and make your lineup of first party content really enticing, right? So I don't know, the idea of like, if it was like one of these studios, if it was like they're selling off their studios and Microsoft bought NetherRealm or Monolith, that's one thing. But the fact that it's like they're going to buy the whole thing and they're going to get Rocksteady, NetherRealm, Monolith, Avalanche, all these guys all in one swoop. It's like, that's a big buy. It's like you have like 6 studios that you just acquired that have yet to put out a game under the Microsoft ownership, under the subsidiary of Microsoft. They have yet to put out a game for you guys exclusively yet. And you're already looking to acquire like another handful of studios. Like, slow your roll. I just don't want to see this become a thing where like Microsoft is buying, and then in 2 years when they realize, oh shit, we bought too much, that's like, okay, well, Compulsion didn't do a great job with their next game, so we'll close them, and Undead Labs, they kind of suck, we'll close them, and stuff like that. I definitely don't want to see that become the case. So I want to make sure that, or I'm just hoping that as a Microsoft fan here, as an Xbox fan, and as a fan of people maintaining their careers and their livelihoods, that this is Microsoft deliberately picking studios that they truly believe in and see potential in, rather than them just buying to look big and reverent by comparison of PlayStation. That's the thing here. And to me, jumping into this purchase would kind of just say that they're buying to buy. They're buying to have that development arm, that strength over Sony, saying, listen, I don't know if any of these guys are going to make us a Last of Us Part 2 or a God of War 2018, but we have so many studios that one of them's bound to make a hit, so fuck you. We got all the leverage over you. And I don't think that's what their intention is, but that's almost what it comes across as, if this is something they're seriously considering. The other part is, as I brought up the other week, does this entail the IP? Does this mean if they buy WB Interactive Entertainment, they not only get Rocksteady, but the Batman license so that they can make Arkham games? Does this mean that they not only get Avalanche Software, but the Harry Potter license so they can make this RPG? They not only get Monolith, but they also get the Lord of the Rings IP. And then, of course, NetherRealm, I assume they get Mortal Kombat with that because NetherRealm or WB owns Mortal Kombat, not WB in general. So I'm confident that they at least get Mortal Kombat, which is a huge get. But then on top of all of that, you also have the problem where it's like, okay, a studio like Avalanche or Monolith, I can see like a world where it's like whatever they're working on next, it's Xbox exclusive. You can make that swing. You can swing that. But if NetherRealm's working on the next Mortal Kombat and Injustice game, as they always are, and if Rocksteady's working on the next Batman Arkham game, which we know they are, or if WB Montreal is working on the next Batman game, which we know they are, it's like, okay, well, you're going to piss off a lot of people by being like, okay, these games are just not on PlayStation anymore. Fuck it. These are all just Xbox exclusives, Xbox and PC only. It's like, I don't know how you get away with that. I just don't think that's such a great move optically. It kind of makes Xbox look like a bunch of assholes if they're like, okay, Xbox didn't have the first party support, so they just went and bought a third party game and made part 4 of a series exclusive to their brand. And I agree. It's like that's not really I don't really think that's what we're looking for, right? Like if you're going to buy Rocksteady, you buy them because they're not working on WB properties anymore. They're working on a new original IP, or they're reviving a pre-existing IP that's unrelated to WB, right? And now you can have them make an exclusive Xbox PC game as an Xbox subsidiary, not, making the 4th entry in the Batman Arkham series and just saying, fuck you, PlayStation, enjoy parts 1 through 3. Part 4 is only on Xbox. I feel like that's just kind of a shitty move, right? Can you imagine Mortal Kombat being an Xbox exclusive? That one's actually kind of a cooler get, I feel like, where it's like, Mortal Kombat's one of those things where it's like, it's not like you need to play Mortal Kombat 9 and 8 and 7 to understand Mortal Kombat 11 or 12 or whatever one's, I think 12 is the next one, right? But at the same time, it's like Mortal Kombat is a series that's so famously known for its history on Nintendo and Sega and PlayStation. So it's like, it's just be so weird if one day Mortal Kombat's an exclusive to Xbox. It'd almost be like the Minecraft thing where it's like they're kind of obligated to just keep it multi-platform because you'd be a big asshole if you just were the guys who made like, oh, I know Xbox. Those are the guys that made it so that we can't play Mortal Kombat anywhere but Xbox. Like, that's kind of a bad image and you don't really want that. So what are you buying these studios to do? Are you buying them to piss people off so that you can just make these pre-existing IPs and game franchises exclusive to Xbox? Or are you just buying the talent so you can have them make new games under the Xbox banner? Like, what are you getting at here? And I just feel like in either direction, it's kind of a bad move where it's like, I don't want to see Microsoft just spend big money on WB so they can just middle finger Sony with Batman and Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, And I don't want to see them buy new studios just to spend money, even though we know Rocksteady's a great studio. We know NetherRealm's a great studio. We know Monolith's a pretty good studio. And Avalanche, as much as most people don't give a shit or know about them, I think they're a great studio. They're one of my favorite studios, in fact, and they'll always be for their work on Disney Infinity. So these are like, it's, keep that in mind. I'm a huge fan of Avalanche Software. Like, one of my dream job would be to work at a video game studio. And honestly, my top 2 favorite studios to work at would be either Avalanche in an imaginary world where Disney Infinity is still around, or 343 working on Halo. Like, that would be my dream job. And I'm still kind of against the idea of Microsoft buying this studio, even though, like, how amazing does that sound? My favorite game dev and my favorite game publishing arm, and they're all together under one. But, like, even that, I still just can't get behind it because I'm like, what is the idea here? What would you want Avalanche? If Avalanche isn't working on Harry Potter or another WB-owned franchise, what do you want Avalanche for? Because they're not too well proven. They worked on Disney Infinity and some movie tie-in license games and that Tak and the Power of Juju series on like the GameCube from back in like the old Nickelodeon days on PS2 GameCube era. So like, what do you want with those guys? They haven't proven anything like too miraculous that you need to go drop $4 billion to acquire them. So is that like a studio Microsoft would just fold instantly if they had them? Like just fold them into other pre-existing teams? And Rocksteady, I get wanting Rocksteady. They're an incredibly talented team. And I get NetherRealm. I think Lethal Migraine or someone made the point a few weeks ago that like, well, now that they don't have Killer Instinct anymore, this would be a great way to have a fighting game under their belt again. Would be get NetherRealm, get Mortal Kombat. And I get that, but like, dude, if I had NetherRealm and our Xbox, I wouldn't want them to make Mortal Kombat. I want them to make something new, or at least like keep Mortal Kombat multi-platform and then make a new fighter that's exclusive to Xbox, but even that gets so hairy. So again, maybe I'm overthinking this, but I'm really not too keen on this idea of Microsoft potentially buying WB Interactive Entertainment. I think it's expensive. I think it's kind of unjustifiable, and maybe there's something I'm missing here. But I'm just not a huge fan of this. So I'm kind of hoping this one doesn't pan out. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Microsoft buys them. Maybe they all just make various Halo games, and it's the greatest thing in the world, and I'm the happiest boy. But I don't really see. Maybe I'm not seeing the forest through the trees here, but I just don't see the inherent benefit to buying this one. And I kind of think it's best left to Ubisoft or an Activision, or for them to just remain WB Interactive Entertainment, AT&T. Maybe you don't need to sell them, you fuckboys. Maybe gaming's a lucrative business and you don't need to offset your debt by selling off your game division, you fuckboys. But anyway, our next story, we're going to move on. Our next story here is that popular Halo YouTuber, I just told you I don't follow Halo YouTubers, and now I'm telling you I do. Popular Halo YouTuber Hidden Xperia, whatever, I'm sure many of you know him, recently had legendary ex-Bungie audio director Marty O'Donnell on his show. And during the interview, we learned some new information regarding Bungie's relationship with Activision and Microsoft. So I know Marty O'Donnell actually kind of commented out the other day, like, wow, slow news story gaming outlets, because everyone was reporting on this. And I don't know if he was just being cheeky or if like he was actually kind of annoyed by the way this was picked up. But nonetheless, we're gonna talk about it anyway. So directly from Windows Central, Marty O'Donnell says, quote in this video, because I was in leadership, I was one of the board directors that went with Activision. If there was any blame for going with Activision, I'm a part of it, O'Donnell said. There were 7 of us total, I think, and we made a deal with Activision. We knew it was a risk right from the get-go, and then it turned out to be exactly as bad as we thought it was going to be. I'm the only one who's going to say that, except everyone who no longer works for Bungie is going to say, yeah, it was bad from the start. The ex-composer claims that Bungie entered a deal with strict terms mandating control over the Destiny IP that ruled out several, quote, big players from publishing the title, including Microsoft. So basically, they're saying that Bungie was very, very adamant that whoever they go with for Bungie, they need to own the IP. And basically, Microsoft said, we're going to own it if you go with us. And they said, no thanks, we're not going with you, Microsoft. And so that's an interesting tidbit we'll get into in a moment there. He says, quote, the reason why we went Activision was not just the money, but it was because as part of the contract, they didn't own the IP. Now remember, Microsoft owns the Halo IP, and we wanted to make sure whoever we work with next would not own the IP. And Activision agreed to all of that. All of the other big players during that period would not agree to that, including Microsoft. It's very close to us making a serious, and then he says ellipses. Sorry, the way he said this is just directly translated from the way he says it. But he says, we almost went back to Microsoft, if you can believe it. And then the story just kind of ends off with Microsoft split with Halo developer Bungie in 2007 as Bungie transitioned into a privately held independent company, while the Halo brand stayed in-house with Xbox. The alleged partnership would have drastically skewed the future Destiny, which instead enjoyed several limited time exclusives on PlayStation as an external for its Activision deal. So this is just a really insightful deal, and honestly, I know the point of the story is to kind of be like, oh, well, Activision sucks, and they knew that Activision sucks from the get-go. I don't really think that's the big story here. I think anyone with like half a brain who knows anything about Activision knows that if you're going to work with Activision, it's probably going to be a shitty deal. They went for 2 reasons. They needed money and they needed to own the IP. So they did what they had to do, and ultimately worked out in the end because now they're completely independent and they own Destiny. So I think they made the right move regardless of whether or not it was choppy and hairy back at the time. So whatever. I think the bigger story here is the whole they almost went with Microsoft thing. And that's because, this is such an unfortunate thing where if Phil had just been in charge a little bit sooner, I think everything would be so different with Bungie. I think Bungie might be an Xbox studio to this day, if Phil had been in charge back in those days, because honestly, this is just indicative of a different era of Microsoft, because we know Microsoft has changed and become more, friendly to other developers and things like that, because we saw Insomniac have a similar situation as Bungie, where they said, hey, we want to make different IPs, but we don't want Sony to own them, because honestly, Microsoft was just kind of playing copycat to Sony, especially back in these days, where this is the thing that Sony's very famous for, is that Sony's always about, hey, whatever you do on our platform, if it's exclusive, we own the property. We'll fund it, we'll publish it, whatever, but we need to own the IP. And that's why we got Sunset Overdrive on Xbox, was because Insomniac wanted to own the IP, and Microsoft was the only one willing to say, yeah, if you let us publish it, if you make it on Xbox exclusively, we'll let you keep the IP. And, that's why Sony owns the Sunset Overdrive IP now that they bought Insomniac all these years later, is because Microsoft let them keep the IP. And that's an example of, the modern Microsoft versus what we're seeing here in the story, which is the old Microsoft, the Microsoft that said, hey, we keep Bungie, or we keep Halo, you can leave us, but we're keeping Halo. And they said, we'll do Destiny with you, but we want to keep it. We won't, can you fucking imagine if they had like a Phil Spencer back in these days in charge? I mean, I know Phil Spencer was at Xbox back then, but can you imagine if Phil Spencer was the top dog, the guy in charge back in these days, and he said, listen, Bungie, we want to keep you in-house. We want to keep you with us. You've been a great partner. You've created some of the best games. You're pretty much responsible for why Xbox exists to this day. Listen, we will let you keep Destiny as long as you let us publish it, you let us fund it, and you let it be an Xbox game. Dude, can you imagine? Because Destiny is like the poster child for this generation when I think about games. You can say Fortnite or Red Dead or whatever you want, but when I think about, what defines the PS4, Xbox One generation, the first game that comes to my mind is Destiny 1. It is the most, it is the game that, not that feels the most next gen, but rather it describes what this generation was all about. It was the open world shared multiplayer shooter with, the long-standing game that is a games as a service, and that's really what this generation was all about. And Destiny kind of kicked that off when you really think about it. It's less of like the let's play this game, move on to this game, move on to this game. It became the story of, this is a game that's coming out in 2014 that we will play for years and years to come. This will be part of our life. We are not Xbox gamers who play Destiny sometimes. We are Destiny gamers that play on this platform. And with going with Activision, Sony got that marketing deal with them, and then Destiny got so intimately connected and marketing tied to PlayStation that it was kind of written off as a PlayStation game, which is such a mind-boggling thing to think about now, because, I mean, remember in 2013 and 2014 when we were seeing Destiny, that this was so crazy. This was Bungie. This is the team that basically made the Xbox, and these are the guys behind Halo, and now they just seem like they're so in bed with like one of the dirtiest publishers of all time, and everything they're doing is all about PlayStation. They're getting all this timed exclusive content and all the marketing deals with PlayStation, and that's just a crazy alternate like fucking history. It's like some fucking alternate Nazi history where Nazi Germany won the war and now everyone's fucking living in a communist dictatorship, and that's kind of the reality of what we dealt with this generation. Was we saw so I had to laugh about it because obviously it's not even remotely anything like that, but I just want to be dramatic because I love Bungie. But you get the rough idea that this is just a crazy thing that happened, and now I guess we're all comfortable with it, right? Because we're used to thinking of Bungie as more of an independent developer, and we're used to thinking of 343 as the Halo team now, and Bungie being the Halo guys as like a thing of the past, and Destiny is Bungie's thing, and Activision is related to Bungie, and PlayStation's related to Bungie, and enough time has passed that we're all acclimated to this. But this is a crazy world right now, and you got to think like, this is one of those things that could have saved the Xbox, right? Destiny, I know it's not a game that like gamers consider as one of the best games of the generation. It's not one of those games that gamers consider of like the creme de la creme of the PS4, Xbox One era. But in terms of sales, in terms of player retention, in terms of like conversation and spark and buzz surrounding this franchise, especially when it was new, man, that would have been like the biggest get if it was like, sure, Xbox One has Kinect and it's a little more expensive and we dropped the ball out the gate with some of the marketing. But guess what? Destiny, that new game you want to play, the Bungie game, it's only on Xbox. So fucking buy Xbox One, you fucking idiots. That would have been such a huge, I'm not saying it would have been the thing that made the Xbox One 100% competitive with the PS4, but that would have been a massive component of it. It would have been a huge get for them. And it's so crazy to think that there was a time where Microsoft was so non-friendly to various developers and consumers and things like that, that this was the Microsoft we dealt with was a Microsoft that was like, yeah, but we got to own the IP, and yeah, we got to have creative freedom, control over it. Like you hear the story about, if you ever play Halo Reach, when you get to the main menu, the start menu, it doesn't say Halo Reach. It actually just says Reach, and it has that beautiful concept art of like the Reach's surface just kind of being glassed and destroyed, and it says like start, campaign, multiplayer, whatever, select options, whatever. And Marcus Leto, the guy from V1 Interactive, who is the co-creator of Master Chief, ex-Bungie employee, was saying a few months ago on Twitter, he was basically saying, yeah, I remember originally we wanted to call the game Reach. We didn't want to call it Halo Reach at all, actually. We just wanted to call it Reach because we thought it was such a powerful name and it stood on its own, and that people would get it, and it would just be like, you know, just be such a strong, powerful name for a game because of what it invokes. And as a Halo fan, of course, I'm frothing at the mouth at the thought of that, like how fucking cool it would have been to call that game Reach and to not even have Halo in the title. Fucking amazing. Such a brilliant idea. But Marcus Leto said, you know, Microsoft was not having it. They were like, no, you have to put Halo in for like SEO purposes and for brand recognition and in order to sell the game. You know, people need to know this is a Halo game. We're not trying to be all artistic about it. We're trying to be, you know, we're trying to sell copies here. We're trying to use our most popular IP to sell millions of units. And so the guys at Bungie agree. They're like, okay, we don't really have a say in it. We can't do anything about it. So the game got called Halo Reach, but they said just to kind of stick it to them and to have some kind of control over that original desire, they just left the title screen as saying Reach without Halo on it, just as kind of like a, fine, we'll call the game Halo Reach like you want. We'll put it on the box, whatever. But for the start menu, we're getting at least a little taste of what we originally wanted. And the reason why I bring that up is because that's just such a small little microcosm of like the kind of control Microsoft used to have. You know, a reminder that even though those were the days where Xbox was on top and where everyone had 360 and everyone loved Xbox, those were actually the days where Microsoft and Xbox were, in my opinion, a worse brand than they are today. Because, yeah, sure, Microsoft it's not struggles, but Xbox isn't a brand that competes as toe-to-toe with PlayStation as we would like for it to be, as much as Xbox 360 did with PS3. But I would argue Xbox is the best it's ever been because you have the leadership of people like Phil Spencer, people who come from the game developer's perspective, people who understand the artist and the creator and want to empower them and encourage them and not get in their way and step on their toes. And you know, they want to empower the consumer and give them options and give them ways to get in the door and to try new things and play new things. That's why we have Game Pass. It's why we have xCloud. It's why Xbox Game Studios or Microsoft. That's why Xbox Studios are so excited about the projects they work on, because we have a new culture at Xbox. We have a new culture at Microsoft that's like, hey, go ahead and do what you want. We're here to facilitate an environment where you are empowered and encouraged and given the resources to make the games you want to make, and for players to find and discover and play the games that speak to them. And that's not the Microsoft we had 10 years ago. And that's what I read this story and think about, is how Bungie fell victim to an era of Microsoft and of Xbox that was, you know, run by corporate politics and run by, you know, the greed and a lack of understanding from a top level going down. And they burned the hell out of Bungie. And it's just such an unfortunate thing, because if there's just any way Microsoft could have held on to Bungie just a little bit longer, maybe here in 2020, we'd be talking about reality where Bungie is an Xbox Game Studios developer, you know, and Bungie is making exclusive games for Xbox, or maybe at the very least they are just a second party studio that has a really great relationship with Xbox, because, you know, Halo made Xbox and Xbox has funded Bungie and they've had a great relationship with one another. Maybe Bungie could be like what Insomniac was to Sony for all those years, until Sony finally bought them last year, which is just a studio where, you know, not necessarily one has to own the other, but they can work together and support each other and have this kind of really good, beneficial relationship for both parties. And unfortunately, that's not what we got, because Microsoft or Xbox used to just not be that brand. It used to just not be that good to its creators or its consumers. I'm not trying to say Xbox was at one point shit and now it's great. I mean, Xbox had its pros and cons then, and it has its pros and cons now, and I don't work for the company. I don't claim to know all these things and the ins and outs of what happens in the corporate politics, but I think it's pretty obvious from anyone's perspective that, you know, the Microsoft that Bungie speaks about when they talk about their split from Bungie after Halo 3, and they talk about things like this, like not going with Xbox when they started working on Destiny. It's like, it's so obvious to all of us here as Xbox fans who are constantly championing all the great things that Xbox is doing in the games industry, and say, wow, these are two very different versions of the same person, right? It's like me in high school when I was constantly like being too cool for school and overcorrecting all my friends and trying to be Mr. Self-Righteous, and then seeing me now when I'm just like, I'm just kind of a piece of shit and I'm just going to leave people alone. It's like, it's just one of those things where it's like, you grow up, you mature, you learn, and you look back and you're like, man, I fucked myself over so hard by being that guy back in those days. And this is a story that just kind of exemplifies how Microsoft was once that guy, and it sucks. It cost them Bungie. And I think, as much as I love 343, as much as I'm excited to see what the initiative is, as much as I love Coalition, as much as I love all of Xbox's studios, Playground Games, what have you, there's no denying that Bungie's the one that got away. If Microsoft could maybe not necessarily own Bungie, but have that relationship with Bungie where Bungie was making games for Xbox and they had that kind of mutualistic relationship, then like, man, that would just be it. That would be that thing where, like, that'd be that golden ticket you hold over everyone's head where it's like, you can't talk shit about Xbox because we got Bungie. And I truly believe it's not as a Halo fan, not as an Xbox fan, but just as a fan of like game design in the games industry in general. Bungie is without a doubt one of the top 5 greatest game developers ever made, period. And I'm not necessarily saying Bungie in its current iteration, but like the Bungie staff back in the day that made like everything from like Combat Evolved to like Destiny 1, like that Bungie team is just pure magic. Like the kinds of games, everything from their art direction to their lore to their storytelling to their gameplay loops to their mechanics to their polish to everything Bungie touches turns to gold. And I know Destiny's not like Halo where it's like immediate 10 out of 10 critical darling, Bungie, Destiny is a game where it's like it's a little more divisive and critically kind of like all over the place, but like people who love Destiny know how great Destiny is. And when I play Destiny, I don't love it the way I love Halo, but it feels like Bungie. And you can see the amount of ingenuity that goes into that game because there is so much unique identity to Destiny. There's so much industry like pioneering going on in that game. And that's what Bungie does the best. They are pioneers. They are not trendsetters. They are trendsetters. They are not followers. And it's such a shame that kind of from the get-go, Microsoft had those guys. And because they just weren't in the right place and handling things at the right way at the right time, they kind of let that one get away. But I guess, that's kind of really far removed from what the story's all about, so we'll move on. But that's kind of my rant on that story. Next up, we got another story from Windows Central, which is that Microsoft have detailed a new tool that may revolutionize the way developers work from home, and that's all thanks to Azure and Project xCloud. So from Windows Central, by accessing the PC Content Test app, PCCTA, developers can use their dev kits through a 60 FPS version of Project xCloud with low latency. That's probably the most nerdy sentence I will ever fucking read on this podcast, and I bet only 7% of listeners had any clue what was just said. But I'll continue on and we'll get back to it. Many of the developers using this are part of Xbox game studios, such as Ninja Theory, Playground Games, Rare, Turn 10 Studios, and Undead Labs. Some third-party companies are also using this technology throughout IDOS Montreal and Infinity Ward, or including IDOS Montreal and Infinity Ward. Sean Davies, technical director at Rare, mentioned that testing builds became extremely difficult when working from home, and that by using the new Project xCloud PCCTA testing builds has gone back to normal, and whenever something went wrong, the team now has a, quote, the flexibility to react when something goes wrong, end quote. So let me explain what this all is, because it's a lot of nerdy talk, but it's actually a really simple concept, and it's that Microsoft is using Azure and Project xCloud to basically allow game developers, namely Xbox Game Studios developers, but as well as other studios like IDOS Montreal and Infinity Ward, to basically access PC builds and in developer tools that are at their office and things like that they don't have access to now that everyone's working from home due to COVID, and basically be able to access it via Project xCloud, via Azure. And so this way they can work on their dev kits and build games for new hardware like Xbox Series X and all these things
basically using the power of the cloud, basically using Azure technology. And this is immensely helpful, as we are in the situation where people aren't able to work together as much or have their studio resources on hand as readily available as they once did, of course, due to COVID. So this is this is one of those things that's like, it doesn't really affect me or you all that much, but it's one of those things that's like, that's just so cool. This is one of those things Microsoft does very well, where it's like, the consumer isn't going to get all giddy about this because it's not like something sexy and hot that we can get our hands all over and talk about. But from the perspective of like empowering developers to be productive and get work done, that sounds like a very Microsoft PR way to put it. But from that perspective, this is a really amazing tool that people can just access their dev kits and their PC builds and all these things that they don't have immediate access to just remotely from their homes, thanks to Project xCloud. That's just amazing. This is the world we live in, where work can be done from anywhere and with anything, just because that's what Azure's all about. It's about giving you the infrastructure and the tools no matter where you are, and tearing down these barriers of you need this expensive hardware in order to power this thing or to pull this thing off. And I just think that's such a cool thing. And there's not really much for me to get into here, but I see this as being extremely beneficial as we start to see more studios figure out how working from home can be more of a regular part of their routine as we work through COVID and then get back to whatever normalcy is. Maybe this won't be the case as much in the games industry, but I assume a lot of industries are going to realize, once we're able to get back to the real world, getting outside and being together again in close proximity, I think a lot of industries are going to obviously come to the realization that, hey, this work from home thing is pretty economical and pretty reasonable for a lot of industries. And through technologies like Project xCloud and Azure from Microsoft, like, these are things that can make, certain jobs completely obsolete in terms of you need to come commute and sit in traffic and go to this office and do this thing on a daily basis. People can just do these things from home. And this is an amazing example of how technologies at Xbox are empowering, developers right now, but potentially like way beyond developers, potentially empowering people from all different disciplines and work disciplines and industries. And I just think that's really fucking cool. And I guess, I don't really know how to really divulge the story too much to make it more video game focused, but that was something that broke a couple hours ago that I just wanted to mention because I personally found that so inspiring and intriguing. So our final wrap-up stories, we got two more here, are that after some leaks and murmurings from last week, Ubisoft has formally revealed and showed extensive footage of their new upcoming Battle Royale game, Hyperspace. The new fast-paced free-to-play Battle Royale game looks to gain a competitive edge in the already crowded space by offering integration with streaming platform Twitch and by twisting the formula of the genre with some unique differences. From IGN, set in the VR world called Hyperspace, the game focuses on a sport called Crown Rush, in which 100 players split into squads of 3 and compete for victory. Wins can be claimed by the usual last team standing manner or by claiming a crown objective in the final phase of the match and holding on to it for 45 seconds. Unlike most Battle Royale games, Hyperspace stands out feature-wise in that it takes place on an entirely urban map. The city, clearly influenced by Paris, is also literally littered with jump pads to allow fast travel and vertical movement. The game also is connected to Twitch to allow spectators a level of influence over the game and to earn rewards by watching during the technical test. Viewers will be able to vote on in-game events such as giving players all the unlimited ammo. In the full game, viewers will also be able to unlock Battle Pass progression by watching people stream Hyperspace and even joining a squad of their favorite streamers. The game is due out later this summer and will be cross-play on all platforms from day one, which is a huge get. So this game, my brother saw it and he was like, oh, this looks really exciting. And it is cool because, I mean, the big allure for me here is that it's crossplay on all platforms day one. So unlike Apex Legends, I could actually play this with my brother and my nephew who are fucking PC losers. But aside from that, I have such a hard time getting excited about this. And I was kind of like resisting bringing this up when we were talking about a Halo Infinite Battle Royale potentially, because it's like, how many of these are there going to be? I understand it's like Ubisoft would be remiss to not at least give this a go, right? Because Epic and EA and all these people are just making so much money hand over fist from their Battle Royale games. It's like, we got to at least try and see if there's any room for us in there, because if we can make money off of this, it'll be so worth it. And so I get that. And the game does look cool. It has a lot of jump pads, which remind me of one of the Apex characters. It has a little bit of raw wall running, which is kind of Titanfall-y, but also looks more like the Call of Duty kind of wall running. And it looks very Titanfall inspired. I won't lie. It looks, as my brother put it, Hyperspace looks more like the Titanfall Battle Royale game than Apex Legends does, which is kind of ironic and funny. And so I'm not trying to shit on the game. Like, I think it looks cool. It looks fun. It looks whatever. Artistically, I think it looks so fucking uninspired. But I guess that's not what matters in a Battle Royale. What matters is if it's addicting and if you're going to spend money in it, I guess. I don't fucking know. I'm just kind of jaded on this genre, and it's really hard for me to say anything thoughtful. So I don't really want to get into it too much. But Ubisoft jumping into the Battle Royale space, this is the kind of thing that worries me about, like, if Halo is going to have a Battle Royale mode. It's like, how crowded is this genre going to be by the time Halo's Battle Royale makes it to market? You know, is it going to be too little too late, or will being just a great game mode be enough to give it a spot in this competitive genre? Or like, what is the thing? But I guess we'll see. Like, if people take to Hyperspace, if it takes off, if it's successful, then maybe there's still more room in this genre. Maybe it's not all filled up like I'm saying it is or thinking it is. But yeah, it's so hard for me to get excited over this. I'll probably give it a try. I'll just download it and give it a try one night, probably when it comes out. If it's good, it's good. But at this point, it's like, dude, there's so many games. I want to go play Yakuza Kiwami, whatever, that remake of the first Yakuza game that's on Game Pass. That's what I want to go play. You know, I want to go replay the Halo games or catch up on those Ori and the Blind Forest games I haven't been able to play yet. Like, I want to play new games or play story games or do something. I don't want to just commit all my life to one game as a service. You know, it's like, what am I between like Halo and Apex Legends and Titanfall and Destiny 2? It's like, where am I supposed to find time to play new games if every fucking game in the world thinks it's going to be the only game you ever play? So that's really my concern with the Battle Royale thing. But I guess the potential earnings here is worth the risk, especially if you're a company like Ubisoft, because you have the money to take the risk and see if it works out. So if it works out, then it was worth it. And if it doesn't work out, you're Ubisoft. You'll bounce back. You'll be fine. So I guess that's the thinking here. But I can't feign excitement for another Battle Royale game. So we will just jump into our last story of the week, which is that late last week, Bethesda announced that Amazon Studios has licensed the right to the Fallout franchise for a TV series. The show has already attained Westworld showrunners Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan on board with the project. And just as a side note, Jonathan Nolan is apparently the brother to Christopher Nolan from the Inception guy, so that's a big get. From Windows Central, Joy and Nolan will executive produce alongside publisher Bethesda, including Bethesda Game Studios director Todd Howard and James Altman, director of publishing operations at Bethesda Softworks. Quote, each chapter of this insanely imaginative story has cost us countless hours we could have spent with our families and friends, Joy and Nolan said in a statement shared to The Hollywood Reporter. They continue, so we're incredibly excited to partner with Todd Howard and the rest of the brilliant lunatics at Bethesda to bring this massive, subversive, and darkly funny universe to life with Amazon Studios. Quote, over the last decade, we looked at many of the ways to bring Fallout to the screen, Howard said. But it was clear that from the moment I first spoke with Jonah and Lisa a few years ago, that they and the team at Kilter were the ones to do it right, end quote. No timeline is set as of yet for when the show might debut, but you can add it to your list of video game things that are becoming watchable things like movies or TV. Who knows if it'll ever actually happen. But this is one of the... I'm actually usually like not too keen on these video games, movies, and things like that, just not because I don't think they work, but because I think historically they don't work. And I think they can work. It's just hard. Like I was saying earlier in the show, even that, like, I love that Halo has like diverse range of media that it spans across. Like I've been listening to the Halo books as audiobooks lately while I'm at work and shit and while I'm commuting, and I've really been enjoying catching up on some more Halo lore by getting into the books. I've always wanted to get into the books, and I'm really enjoying them. They're not amazing novels, but they're really interesting plot points with some decent writing, and I'm really enjoying them, and I'm seeing ways in which like Halo can be greatly expanded as a novel. Again, this is what I was saying earlier about the theme park thing, where every medium of storytelling has its pros and cons, and it's awesome to see a world I love like the Halo universe, you know, which is by default a video game universe, explored in different ways like novels and sometimes with TV with like podcasts like Hunt the Truth and movies like the Forward Unto Dawn show movie they did, or the Nightfall show they did, things like that, where it's like I'm excited to see things I love expand different mediums, but it's like you got to do it right. So usually I'm pretty down on these things because you think about things like the shitty Doom movie and the shitty Hitman movies and the shitty Assassin's Creed movie and the shitty Prince of Persia movie and all this crap, and you're just like, come on, or like even the Sonic movie, which as a huge Sonic fan, I thought the Sonic movie was pretty good, but at the end of the day, it's not Sonic. It doesn't, it's not Sonic. It's not the Sonic I know and love. It feels like a Hollywood Sonic, right? They diluted Sonic and made him like a thing for young American boys and diluted him to like a Hollywood whatever it is. Like, it doesn't feel like the Sonic you love from the games. Like, even though I thought it was a pretty good movie, it's just not Sonic. So I see things like this, I'm like, how are you guys going to do this justice? But with Fallout, this is one of the rare examples where I'm like, actually, this might work, because I think as someone who has tried to play Fallout 3 a million times and given up every time because I just don't care, and who got halfway through Fallout 4 and then gave up because I just don't care, Fallout is a series that I absolutely adore, from the world it's set in and the art direction, and just I think it's super fun and interesting and exciting, and I think everyone would agree with that. Fallout is such a great license just from its setting and environment. I think it's just super fun, and I kind of get the idea here where it's like, I think what Fallout is it's universally attractive enough and appealing enough that maybe some people aren't giving Fallout a try because video games aren't their thing. But if you provide Fallout and serve it in a way that's more palatable to general audiences, like TV, you might capture an even bigger audience for a franchise like Fallout, because all the trappings and things that make Fallout special, which is its setting, I think translate very well to the big screen, whether it's a movie or a TV show. So Fallout's kind of, when you think about what makes a Fallout game great, it's the setting and it's the premise. It's not like the characters, You don't play a Fallout game and you're like, oh my god, my character is so amazing. It's like your character doesn't have it's kind of like the disconnect I have with open world games, where like publishers always say open world games are great because you can create your own character, you can make a male or female or change their skin color, or like make them a cat, or fucking give them a tail and name them whatever you want and change their voice, and that's true player agency, which I think is so funny because I'm like, that's not player agency to me at all, because you play a game like Fallout and your character has no personality because they have to make your character so general so that you can customize it, that when you're actually playing the story beats of the game, your character feels like a fucking nobody. And at least me personally, when I play games like that where you make your own character, I have no emotional connection to my character. In fact, a fun fact, whenever I play an open world game where you create your own character, I always intentionally make the character as far apart from me as possible. I without fail, I always choose a female character, and then I just try to make her look very different from me, because I'm like, no matter what I make this character like, I'm not going to see her, care about her, or relate to her, or anything in any way possible. Because first of all, the game's in first person. You don't see your character at all. And then when you're like going through dialogue trees and picking real options, it doesn't feel like this character I created is speaking and interacting in this world. It just feels like I made a character, and that kind of starts and ends with the character creation. And now I'm interacting with NPCs throughout the world, and that just feels like me, the player, kind of blasting through the dialogue screens like, this. It just, I don't know. To me, that never really clicks, that cohesion of like, create your own character, live out your own adventure in this world. Like, to me, I don't actually feel like that's player agency. To me, I feel like player agency is when you create the character, you create the scenario, and then you give me the control and the ability to decide and manipulate that character the way I choose to do. To me, that's player agency. Is like, wow, so you're telling me Master Chief is this specific person, but depending on how I play the game depends like who Master Chief is. Like, that's player agency, not create this generic person that doesn't even have a voice actor tied behind them and whatever. So the only reason I bring that up is to say that, like, I think that's the key with Fallout, is like, the characters don't matter in Fallout. Like, there are no memorable characters to me in Fallout. I think the character you create and play as doesn't fucking matter one bit in Fallout. I think what matters in Fallout is the setting. It's this like, middle 20th century, like early to mid 20th century America that's like this nuclear fallout that's like, kind of futuristic, but kind of like trapped with this like 1950s technology. It's super fucking cool. I think that's what people love about Fallout. So it's like, well, what if you actually created compelling characters for the Fallout universe and then you just recreated that setting for TV? It's like, well, that could actually work. So what matters in Fallout is that setting and that you come out of a vault, right? And that can easily be adapted to TV. So this is like a rare example. I guess I'm just, long story short, this is a rare example of like me thinking that this can actually be pulled off pretty well. And apparently these are pretty good showrunners, so maybe they got some good tricks up their sleeves. I'm not writing this one off, is what I'm saying. I think this one could be interesting, and I would love an excuse to like Fallout. I can't get behind the games to save my life. I know I need to give Fallout New Vegas a try, especially because it's an Obsidian-made game and everything. But man, I have almost no interest in giving Fallout a chance ever again. That's my problem. So if they can make a compelling TV show that brings that awesome-looking setting to life, but with some actually interesting characters I give a shit about, then I'd be interested in giving it a try. So I don't know. That's going to do it for all of our news this week. Now that we're in 4 hours, just some quick ones to run through. Little stories important enough to make the show, but not important enough to warrant their own discussion. We've got that Nacon, the European gaming peripheral company, have announced a new global licensing agreement with Microsoft to create officially licensed accessories for Xbox Series X controllers, or for consoles rather. And then next we got, beginning the 21st of July, Jeff Keighley and the Game Awards will be kicking off the Summer Game Fest demo event, which will run from July 21st through 27th. Players will be able to try more than 60 new game demos for upcoming unreleased Xbox games. Look for special Game Fest look for special Game Fest demo tiles on the Xbox One dashboard that week to find collections of available demos. Some of the games you can expect to see include Christ Tale, Destroy All Humans, Haven, Hellpoint, Skatebird, which I want to play a lot, The Veil, Shadow of the Crown, Raj, and Ancient Empire, and Welcome to Elk. Our next one here is that the Gears 5 Operation 4 begins on July 14th and is called Operation 4 Brothers in Arms. The new players during this operation include Dominic Santiago. Much like the Carmine brothers who were added in Operation 3, Dom will only be available in PvP matches with PvE support coming later. Other new characters and new maps will be added throughout Operation 4. Next, we've got that Windows Central reports Mafia Definitive Edition has been delayed to September 25th. They've also reported that Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning is now set to be released on September 8th and will be getting an expansion called Faresworn, which will be released sometime in 2021. Next, we've got that as part of Bungie Day, 343 have announced that Halo 3 will be officially launching on the PC via the Master Chief Collection on July 14th. Interesting to see 343 celebrating Bungie Day, but Halo 3 was a Bungie game, so all in good fun. And then our last few here, that peripheral maker 8BitO have announced a new controller clip designed specifically with Project xCloud in mind. It even has the official Xbox guide button on it. Amazon pre-orders for the SN30 Pro controller are up now for $45, and the controller will release on September 21st. And our final two are that earlier this week, roughly 30 minutes of Assassin's Creed Valhalla gameplay leaked, guessing that someone carried out the job that Ubisoft and Microsoft failed to do back in May. And then finally, the Dark Pictures anthology, Little Hope, has received a release date of October 30th on Xbox One. This is the second entry in Supermassive Games' the Dark Pictures anthology following 2019's Man of Medan. And that's going to do it for all of our news this week, guys. As always, we will round out the show by going over the new game releases of the week from Xbox Wire. This week there are a total of 11 new game releases that I will now go over, and we will, of course, as usual, as tradition dictates, describe these games based on the titles and the screenshots alone and nothing more. Let's do a fast round since we're going really long this week, and I'm going to be up all fucking night processing and condensing and uploading this one. So first one is that NASCAR Heat is coming out on July 7th. This is a game in the Cars universe. It takes place before cars had eyeballs, but after they had wheels. So our next game here is called Super Liminal, coming out July 7th. This is a game with a hallway, and there's a giant chess piece in the hallway. So this is a game about fire safety and why you shouldn't block fire routes and exit routes. Our next game is called Lanternium, which is basically Gary the Snail from SpongeBob, except he is old and graying and looks angry, and then that Rocky Raccoon guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're in this Qbert little puzzle room, and it has lighting effects that look like Unreal Engine 4. And then our next game here is called Robozarro, which is a combination of Bizarro, the Superman villain, and robots, meaning that everyone in Superman must be a robot because Superman is the most uninspired and generic superhero of all time because the guy has no fucking weaknesses, and that's boring as hell. No one wants a superhero with no plights or weaknesses or setbacks. That's not relatable. Who thought that was a fucking good idea? Our next game is called Crosscode. It's on Xbox Game Pass. It's out July 9th. This Crosscode is when you and a friend make a pact. You make a code, a brother's, an arms code, and you promise not to cross it, but then you cross it anyway. So this is a friend about being a big old. This is a game about being a big old dick of a friend. And then our next game is called Distraint 2, which is a game where you play as these oversized bobblehead men who have to have the distraint not to kill themselves because they are so ugly and hideous. And of course, they all have beards and 5 o'clock shadow because they're hipsters. And their next game is called Sword Art Online, Alicia Zara edition, Alicia Zara Lycoris. So this is a game where you play as an anime girl, but what makes this interesting is that she not only wields a sword but is fully armored. This is like a historical moment in Japanese gaming where they have a female character who's not overly sexualized, and she's wearing an appropriate amount of armor to protect her in battle. I think this girl could probably go up against every female anime warrior in the history of video games and anime and manga, period. And she would successfully defeat all of them and survive because she is properly armored with the exception of a helmet. She has her breasts covered. She has her thighs covered. She has her butt covered. This woman is going to be able to sustain damage taken in combat, unlike all the other anime girls who would probably just die in less than a one hit because they're pretty much just big old boobies and butts sticking out with like magic spells and shit. So good on them for being socially progressive and not over-sexualizing this woman. Hopefully that will allow her to survive in battle and not die as a martyr for pervy men. And then our next game is called F1 2020. I don't know why it's called F1 2020. It's literally just a picture of a Red Bull sports racing car. It's like there's not even a game world. They forgot to design one. It's just a red background. So if you want to play as a game where you're a sports car but from the side view and you don't even get to run around because they forgot to build a world around this car, this is a stupid fucking game. You can go ahead and download it. It's a waste of money. I'd play Forza instead. We got the great Perhaps this week. The Great Perhaps is a game about a man dressed in a spaceman suit who thinks about all the things he could have done, perhaps, but he did something else instead. So The Great Perhaps is about perhaps I don't have a college degree in political science. Therefore, I shouldn't apply for this job as a consultant worker. And I don't have enough friends to go to Chuck E. Cheese and rent out the entire building because they won't rent it out to one lonely man who wants to play at Chuck E. Cheese alone. And perhaps I shouldn't have eaten 4 double cheeseburgers at the McDonald's drive-thru because even though they were delicious and I had no problem taking them all down, I now am having a hard time breathing and feeling fat and disgusting. So that's The Great Perhaps. And then our next game is called Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2, which I think has already happened before. Then we got Sisters Royale, 5 Sisters Under Fire, which is an Xbox Play Anywhere game. And you know my policy on Play Anywhere games. You should play them nowhere because this is a very visually overstimulating anime rhythm game. And that's going to do it for all of our games this week. I appreciate you sticking by. That one wasn't really a fun one, but we had to get through it. So thank you, as always. Now, remember that for the rest of the month, we got a couple of games with gold. If you're on the Xbox One, you got WRC 8 FIA World Rally Championship for the rest of the month. You got Dunk Lords going from the 16th to August 15th. And then on the 360 side, you got Saints Row 2 until the 15th. And then for the other 360 game, you got Juju going from the 16th to the 31st. So be sure and download all those games. As for the podcast, I'm fucking tired. I'm going to go edit, compress, upload, whatever I do with this podcast every week and get it up to you by 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning. As always, and I greatly appreciate you guys writing in. I really appreciate your feedback. Let me know if I probably should have mentioned this at the top of the show because I doubt anyone listens this far in. But if you're still listening and you enjoy the comments and things like that on the show, let me know. Is that something that should be moved to the end of the show so that we can cover the news earlier and then get to the questions, comments, concerns, or should we keep it the way it is? we're starting to get enough feedback that I feel like maybe that should be a segment after the news. Whereas, before I like to put it at the front because no one commented on the show. So if I ever got a comment, it would be easy to knock it out early on the show. So you let me know what you think about that if you have any preference. But more important than that question, I want to put another pressing question. 2 weeks ago I asked, what are your preferred pizza toppings? Last week I asked, waffles or pancakes? And this week I want to ask you a very pressing question, food related, of course. I want to ask, burritos or tacos? Let me know. And that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. And Eric, you are free to play us out with one of your mesmerizing tunes. See you next week. And oh yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I will be tweeting out from the Scarlet Nexus Twitter account this week. That new Namco game on the Xbox Series X that we saw in May, I will be tweeting out from that account. So look out for Scarlet Nexus on Twitter, tweeting about Halo Infinite and Sonic the Hedgehog, because you will see it there all week. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Bye.